Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're heading straight down the long, quiet roads of Texas, where old trucks still roll through the dark even when no one's behind the wheel. People have seen them pass by cemeteries, idle outside houses, and vanish into the fog without a trace. These 20 true stories are about trucks that moved on their own, showed up where they shouldn't be, and kept driving like they had somewhere to go, even when their drivers had been dead for days. But before we begin, I have to warn you, most viewers make one big mistake. They watch, they get scared, they keep watching, but they forget to subscribe. And by doing that, they miss out on stories like this, stories that stick with you long after the screen goes dark. Don't be one of them. Tap that subscribe button now and stay with us as we head deeper into the unknown. Where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments. Because out here in Texas, when the road goes quiet and the engine keeps running, that's when the real horror begins. Let's get into it. It was just past 5 in the morning when Trooper Eli Harper pulled off the shoulder of Highway 31, east of Corsicana, coffee lukewarm in the cup holder and static humming low from the dispatch radio. Fog had rolled in like a silent tide, thick and soupy, pressing against the windshield like a wet wool blanket. The kind of fog that swallowed taillights and made the world feel smaller, like you were the only thing alive on the road. Harper had been working the pre-dawn shift for years, knew every dip and bend in the highways around Navarro County, but that morning felt different. Off somehow. Still. Too still. Not even the low whine of insects or the usual distant rumble of 18-wheelers breaking the silence. He was about to call it in for a routine checkpoint check when he saw it, a white delivery truck coming out of the fog from behind him, headlights. Low, boxy silhouette steady as it crept toward him. No logos, no markings, just flat matte white. Harper blinked. It didn't belong to any of the usual fleets. No FedEx, no UPS. Not one of those local bakery or vac delivery vans either. Just plain. Almost like it was unfinished. It passed his cruiser without slowing, didn't even tap the brakes. That was odd. Most drivers, especially in this kind of fog, slowed when they saw the squad car. Something about it tickled the back of Harper's neck. He pulled out behind it, keeping a casual distance. Not aggressive. Just curious. The truck kept a perfect pace 45 on the dot. Not a mile over. Not a mile under. Steady dot. Then he noticed there was no license plate. No back plate. No temp tag in the window. Nothing. He keyed his mic. Dispatch, this is Unit 17. I'm behind a white delivery truck, no visible plates. Heading eastbound on 31. Gonna make a stop. Over. Static, then a garbled reply. Copy that. Unit 17 log position. The rest was drowned out. Fog thickened as he followed the truck past an abandoned feed store and into the denser woods. Lining the stretch of road just before Cedar Creek Lake, Harper flicked his high beams, hoping to signal the driver to pull over. No response. The truck never sped up, never wobbled. Just kept its quiet course like it was floating through the mist on rails. Something about the brake lights made Harper squint. They were dull, barely glowing. And the longer he looked, the more he realized the vehicle wasn't producing any sound. Not even the low diesel growl those trucks usually had. No tire hiss against the wet asphalt. It was like following a ghost. At mile marker 42, the truck veered off the road. No turn signal. No warning. Just a slow drift onto a narrow access path. That led toward the lake, an old maintenance route that hadn't been used in years. Harper hesitated, then followed. Tree limbs scratched the cruiser's sides. Leaves fell in swirls. Fog hung thicker here, dampening everything but the quiet crunch of his tires. Up ahead, The truck paused at the tree line bordering the lake. Then it started moving again, slower now. Harper's headlights caught something in the rear window. Nothing. No driver, no silhouette. The cab was empty. He slammed the brakes and stared, heart pounding hard enough to echo in his throat. What the hell? The truck didn't stop. It rolled forward, calm as can be, straight down the crumbling bank. Harper reached for his door, but before he could get out, the truck's nose dipped into the water. Then the box. Then the roof. No splash, no panic. Just a slow, soundless descent like it was being pulled under by invisible hands. He scrambled out, boots crunching gravel, ran toward the water's edge. Ripples spread across the lake in lazy circles. No bubbles. No sign of the truck. It had vanished, swallowed whole. He stood there for a long time, mist clinging to his jacket, unsure if he should radio it in or keep it to himself. But something inside told him this wasn't something that fit into a report. Still, he keyed the mic again. Dispatch. Vehicle entered the lake. No driver, no plates. Need backup and dive team at Cedar Creek. Access path east of mile marker 42. The radio crackled, but no voice came through. He tried again and again. Nothing. Later, when the divers came, they found nothing. No skid marks, no debris, no submerged vehicle. Harper insisted he watched it go in, swore up and down it had no driver. But the lake was calm, unbothered, as if it had never been touched. They ran his dash cam, hoping it captured something. It did, but only fog. Endless, thick fog. No truck, no tail lights. Just Harper's voice, breathing hard, swearing he could see it right there. In the weeks that followed, rumors spread. Locals started saying they saw a white delivery truck sitting parked at odd places before dawn near the fire station in Malakoff, behind the closed-down schoolhouse in Trinidad. No one saw who drove it, and it never left tire marks. One woman claimed she saw it outside her farmhouse at 3 a.m., just idling in the fog, engine silent. She stepped out with her flashlight and found it empty, cab door open. But when she turned to call her husband, it was gone. No taillights. No sound. Harper took early retirement after that. Moved out west. Said the fog still gives him nightmares. Says he wakes up some nights and sees headlights shining through his bedroom window. Not bright, just barely glowing. And always facing him, never moving. Just watching. They say the lake never gave up the truck, and maybe it never will. Because maybe it didn't belong to this side to begin with. The first time it rolled past, nobody paid it much mind. The funeral was already strange enough. Hotter than expected for early November. Dry enough that the preacher's voice cracked halfway through his reading from Ecclesiastes. They'd all gathered around to say goodbye to Henry Merle, and nobody was thinking straight. Small towns in Texas breed long memories and longer silences, and Henry had given everyone reason to remember him for the wrong reasons. He'd been a hard man. Not cruel, exactly, just unforgiving. He never trusted banks, never tipped waitresses, and never went a day without driving that old red pickup of his around the county roads, like it was the only damn thing left on earth worth running. Folks said he'd driven that Chevy for 30 years, and when it finally gave out, he rebuilt it from junkyard scraps with his own 2 hands. Swore it purred better than any new model. Said it talked to him. Most laughed that off. Some didn't. He died in his sleep. That's what the obituary said, peacefully in his home, alone. The first lap around the cemetery happened just as they were lowering the casket. Nobody really noticed until the sound of the engine echoed through the hills. An unmistakable chug-chug whine of a Chevy 2500 with a bent exhaust and bad bearings. There was no reason for a truck to be on that gravel circle drive behind the cemetery wall. It wasn't a through road, just a looping lane for hearses and maintenance trucks. But there it was. Red paint dulled by sun, tires coated in dust, humming slowly past the line of black suits and gray hair. Someone muttered that it looked like Henry's truck. A few others agreed, but no one stepped forward. No one got a clear look at the driver. They were too stunned, too hot, too confused. The engine faded as the truck rolled behind the oaks, out of view, slow and deliberate, not rushed, not afraid. The preacher cleared his throat and continued, but when the truck came back around, just as the last bit of dirt hit the lid, people froze. It was the same truck. No question now. The dented bumper, the twisted antenna, the busted rearview mirror hanging on by a thread. Henry's truck. It moved at the same pace, tires crunching dry gravel, sun flashing off the windshield like an eye turned sideways. Still. No face behind the glass. Just dark shapes, shadows too deep for noon. Someone whispered Henry's name. The second pass was slower. Almost like it was looking. Then it was gone. They finished the burial in silence. No one said a word about the truck, not out loud. Not right away. 2 days later, Sheriff Wayne Rowley pulled up outside the Merle property. He'd been told the truck was gone, that the family had planned to sell it or scrap it, but curiosity and old duty made him check for himself. He drove out past the rusted gate and the leaning fence line, and sure enough, the red Chevy was still there, parked right where Henry always left it, under the carport, half covered in a rotted tarp. It was up on blocks. No wheels. No engine. Battery had been removed a week ago by Henry's nephew, who'd come down from Lubbock to help clear the place. It couldn't have moved. Not an inch. Wayne stood there a long while. He didn't say much, just scratched at the stubble on his neck and watched the flies dance over the hood. The air was thick, sour with cedar and motor oil. He left without touching anything. That night, someone spotted the truck again. It was seen rolling past the post office just after midnight. Engine humming, headlights off, moving slower than a man walks. A night clerk taking out the trash said it coasted by like it didn't care who saw. No tags, no driver. Just the sound of something old and heavy remembering the road. After that, the sightings came faster. A high schooler saw it parked near the edge of the football field, engine idling. Empty cab. A nurse on the night shift followed it for a mile before it turned onto a dirt road and vanished without kicking up dust. A mailman found fresh tire tracks leading through his backyard in the shape of a perfect circle. And then, someone claimed to hear the radio. That was what made it worse. Not the sight of it, but the sound. The voice. Static crackling like dry leaves, then a low voice humming something familiar. A church hymn, maybe, or Hank Williams. Something old. Something about going home. They said the truck was searching. That it didn't know Henry was dead. That it was trying to complete something unfinished. One man swore the truck parked itself outside his house and didn't leave for hours. Just sat there. No lights, no driver, no sound until he stepped outside. Then the engine growled to life, and it backed away without wheels turning and slipped into the dark. A mechanic from down in Dale swore up and down he saw it drive straight through a barbed wire fence without bending the wire. No one got a picture. Cameras glitched. Footage disappeared. Phones froze. But people kept seeing it. Kept hearing that engine. Then came the third funeral. Sandra King, 72, lived 2 miles from Henry, knew him growing up, had refused to attend his funeral even when her sister begged her to come. Said Henry was a bitter old bastard. Said the world was better without him. Her funeral was small. Just 10 folks and the preacher again, reading from the same Bible. Halfway through the eulogy, someone shouted that the truck was there. Parked this time. not circling. Not moving. It sat at the far edge of the cemetery between two dying pecan trees. The hood gleamed wet with morning dew, even though it hadn't rained. The driver's side window was rolled halfway down. The engine ticked like it had just been turned off. Wayne showed up 20 minutes later. By then, the truck was gone. No tracks. No prints, no explanation. Sandra's sister claimed she heard it whisper her name. The town stopped talking about it after that. Publicly, anyway, but people still left their porch lights on. Still avoided the cemetery road after dusk. And more. Then once, late at night, Wayne's radio picked up a soft, gravelly hum. Not a voice, not a song. Just the rhythm of an old engine turning over in the dark. A sound he'd know anywhere. They buried Henry Merle again, sort of. They dug a small hole behind the cemetery, far from the others, and placed the truck keys inside. Buried them beneath the same tree he'd crashed into when he was 17. Drunk and bloody, but grinning like the devil. The sighting stopped after that. Mostly. But every now and then, when the wind dies and the crickets hold their breath, people of that small Texas town swear they can still hear it. That old red truck, rolling slow down a road no one uses anymore, looking for something that ain't there. The first time Amos saw the truck, it was just past dusk. That soft purple hour when the Texas sky bleeds lavender and everything looks like it's been dunked in old film stock. He was sitting on the porch of his one-story ranch just outside Bluff Creek, a town so small the gas station still used those old pumps that clicked and clanked like pinball machines. His wife had passed the year before, cancer in the stomach, slow and mean, and since then, the evenings had taken on a certain kind of echo. Not quiet, not really, but hollow, like something used to live there and had since crawled off. The truck wasn't there, and then it was a red F-150, early 90s model, maybe late 80s, rust scabbing around the wheel wells, paint dull like dried blood. It was parked half in the ditch across from his house, headlights burning through the dusk, angled straight at his porch. Amos squinted into the beams. The glass shimmered, but the cab looked empty. He stood up, hand resting on the porch rail, and waited. 5 minutes passed. No movement, no engine noise. No door open or close. Just those high beams steady as a prayer, casting long white arms across his yard. He went inside and called the sheriff's office, but all he got was deputy Howell, who sounded bored and halfway through a meatloaf sandwich. "We'll swing by in a bit," he said, "but it's probably just some drunk forgot which way his driveway was." Amos didn't argue. Just nodded into the phone, even though Howell couldn't see it. He hung up, turned off the living room light, and peeked back out the window. The truck was still there. Lights still on. No one in sight. He woke up sometime around 3 a.m., dry-mouthed and sweating. He went to the window, a sick little curiosity twisting inside him like a FICE-HHO OK. The truck was gone. Not idling. Not turning around. Just gone. No tire tracks in the gravel shoulder. No dents in the grass where it had sat. Just dew and moonlight and an empty stretch of road. It came back the next night. Same time. Same spot. Same blinding headlights angled right at him like twin eyes. And again, no driver. No sound. No movement. Just presence. This time, he didn't call the sheriff. He just watched. It came every night after that. At exactly 8:17 p.m., as if on a schedule only understood. Headlights on. No engine hum. Never. Earlier, never later. Sometimes he sat on the porch with a shotgun across his knees. Sometimes he just watched through the slats in the blinds, his heart knocking loud against his ribs. A couple of times he walked halfway down the driveway, close. Enough to hear the crickets around it go silent, but never close enough to touch. The lights never flickered. The truck never moved until one night it did. It was early October when things changed. A breeze had blown in from the lake, bringing with it that first sharp promise of fall. And Amos had just poured himself a shot of cheap bourbon. The sun had barely vanished behind the trees when he noticed the beams were already on. But this time, they were closer. The truck was still in the ditch, but angled sharper now, like it had rolled a few feet forward. The wheels were turned slightly inward, like it had crept, nudged its way forward. The next night, it was halfway out of the ditch. Still no driver. Still no sound. The night after that, it was across the road, front tires kissing the edge of his yard. Amos stopped sleeping. He couldn't. His ears stayed peeled for the scrape of tires or the groan of old brakes, but the thing never made sound. His porch light burned out and he didn't replace it. Felt useless against those headlights anyway. By the second week of October, the truck was in his driveway, dead center. Lights still burning. Always on. He called Howell again. This time the deputy came, cruised up slow in a county car, tapping on the steering wheel like he had all the time in the world. But the truck wasn't there. "How long you been off your meds, Amos?" Howell asked with a half smile not unkind. "Just tired." Amos didn't answer. He just looked at the gravel where the tires had definitely been. There were no marks, but he knew, that night, the lights were back. Right at the edge of the porch now. And he could see through the windshield this time. Not well. Just enough. There was a shape in the driver's seat, slumped forward. Something too long about the arms. Too pale about the fingers resting on the wheel. He stayed inside. The lights stayed on. By Halloween, the truck was up on the lawn, right beneath the front window. The grass hadn't died from the tires. Nothing crushed or trampled. The truck just floated into place each night. Those twin beams locked on his living room. That was the night it left its door open. He heard it. Quiet creak like someone opening a closet door. Then a second sound, a heavy drag, like something pulling its weight across concrete. He didn't look, didn't move. He just sat in his recliner, heart in his throat, bourbon bottle in his lap, and waited. He doesn't remember falling asleep. But he woke with the sun on his face, the bottle spilled beside him, and a smear of dirty handprints on the glass outside the front window. Not fingerprints, whole handprints. As if someone had leaned in, pressed both palms to the glass and peered in. The truck was gone. For 2 nights. It didn't return. He almost convinced himself it was over. Then, on the 3rd night, the lights came back. But this time, they were already on. Already in the yard. Already flooding the whole front of the house with that pale, unblinking stare. He didn't move. The next morning, there were boot prints on the porch. The old kind. Work boots? Maybe steel toe. Heavy. Deep. They led from the lawn to the front door, but not away. He boarded up the windows. Stopped answering the phone. Shut off the power. No lights. No sound. Just waited. Some nights, the truck beeped. Not the horn, something sharper. A long, electronic tone, like an alarm on a heart monitor. It pulsed once, then silence. Once again. Then silence. Once, he peeked through a crack in the plywood and saw his wife. She was sitting in the passenger seat, not as she was when she died. Not bald and bruised and fading, but young, vibrant. The way she looked on their first road trip together down Route 67, her hair curled over her shoulder, her dress fluttering from some unseen breeze. She turned her head and smiled. He hasn't. Opened the door and weak neighbors stopped coming by. Mail piled up. Grass grew tall and wild. But every night the lights stay on. Every night the truck gets a little closer. And now there are 2 sets of prints on the porch. One small, one large. both leading to the door, still no marks leaving. It started just after midnight. The air outside still carried the heavy, sticky breath of East Texas summer, the kind of heat that clung to your skin like damp wool and never quite let go. The funeral had drained what was left of my nerves. I'd watched the casket go into the ground that morning, covered in sun-baked dust, and still hadn't fully accepted that Jesse was really gone. I kept half expecting him to walk through the door again like it was some kind of mix-up, like he'd been gone fishing too long and forgot to charge his damn phone. But there was no denying that he was dead. The whole town showed up to prove it. The service was full of men in boots, wide-brimmed hats removed respectfully in trembling hands. Even old Sheriff Donnelly came out, and he hadn't been seen in public since he broke his hip chasing down a meth head on FM 346. Everyone loved Jesse. They loved him more than I ever understood. And I hated myself for not telling him that enough. I couldn't sleep that night. I laid in bed listening to the fan blades turn, trying to ignore the grief sitting on my chest like a wet pillow. I was drifting in and out, numb more than tired, when I heard it. The sound was faint at first, that deep, uneven rumble I knew too well. Jesse's truck had always had a warped timing belt. You could hear it before you saw it, a hiccup in the purr, like the engine stuttered every few seconds, just enough to tell you it was his. That 1977 Chevy C10 was his baby. Bright red, rust streaks around the back wheel wells. The front bumper bent just enough to suggest a fight with a fence post. He refused to fix it, said it gave the truck character. Even when the muffler started to drag and rattle like a chain, he wouldn't touch it. "It's mine," he'd say. "Let it speak." So when I heard that same off-kilter growl outside my bedroom window, I froze. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, caught in one of those vivid grief loops where the dead come back just to remind you they're not staying. But then the sound didn't fade. It got louder, parked itself in my driveway, and stayed, just idling. I didn't want to look. I told myself it couldn't be. Jesse's truck was at the house on Bramble Street, the one he used to rent before he passed. I'd left the keys with the landlord after the funeral, along with a box of tools he kept in the back seat. But the sound outside was too perfect, too. Exact. I swung my legs off the bed and padded to the window barefoot. My fingers trembled as I lifted the blinds just enough to see. There it was, sitting right at the edge of the gravel, headlights off but taillights glowing faint and red in the dark. The truck, Jesse's truck, the same bent bumper, the same scuffed fender, the dull gleam of the rearview mirror he always meant to replace. It even had the Army decal in the back window, the one he'd slapped on sideways, after he got home from his second tour and never corrected. My throat dried up. I told myself it had to be someone playing a sick joke, someone who bought the truck after Jesse died. Maybe the landlord sold it, but who would bring it here? Who would know to park it outside my room? I slipped on a robe and went outside. The gravel under my feet was cold, and the cicadas had gone quiet, like they knew something was wrong. The truck idled, low and steady. I approached it like it might spook and vanish, like an animal too broken to run. As I neared the driver's side window, I felt a shift in the air. Not wind, but pressure, like something unseen holding its breath. I bent slightly, peering in. No one was inside. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger seat, too. Keys weren't in the ignition. The radio wasn't on. But the engine was running, loud and real and close enough I could smell the gas. I reached for the door handle, heart pounding. My fingers touched it, and the engine died. Went still. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was cavernous. Like sound itself had packed up and left. The door handle was warm. 2? Warm. I jerked my hand back like it had burned me, then stepped away. A breeze kicked up suddenly, scattering leaves across the yard, and I backed toward the house, half expecting the truck to lurch to life and follow me. But it just sat there, dark and dead now, like it had been abandoned for years. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of my bed, clutching Jesse's dog tags, the ones the army sent after the accident. In the morning, when the sun bled through the blinds, I crept back outside. The truck was gone. Not just gone. Erased. No tire tracks. No oil stains. No marks in the gravel. Nothing. I called the landlord. She swore she still had the keys. Hadn't even touched the truck since I left it. Said it was still sitting in Jesse's old driveway when she checked that morning. I told her about the night visit. She didn't laugh. Didn't call me crazy. Just went real quiet before whispering, "You were close. Maybe he just needed to see you one more time." That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The truck came back 2 nights later. Same time. Same place. Same slow idle. I didn't go out this time. Just watched from the window, breathing through my hand as it sat there, engine purring like a heartbeat. This time, the lights flicked on. Not the headlights, the dome light inside. It cast a pale orange glow across the empty cab, revealing something I wish I'd never seen. Scratches. Long, desperate scratches across the inside of the windshield. Dozens of them, some deep enough to catch light. They weren't there before. I was sure of it. Jesse had always kept the inside clean. The scratches looked frantic, like someone had clawed at the glass from the inside, trying to get out. I shut the blinds, locked every door in the house, didn't sleep. Didn't even blink for hours. The truck didn't return the next night. Or the one after. I thought maybe whatever tether had dragged Jesse back had finally snapped. That his soul or shadow or whatever had used that damn truck as a vessel to say goodbye. But I was wrong. It was never about goodbyes. It came back a week later, and this time, it didn't stay in the driveway. I heard the engine again, closer than ever, and then the floorboards beneath my bed vibrated. Headlights flooded my window. When I peeked out, the truck was parked on the lawn, inches from the house, its nose pointed straight at my bedroom. I screamed. Called 911. The dispatcher kept saying they couldn't hear the engine over the line, only my voice. When the cops showed up, the truck was gone. Again. But the grass was scorched in 2 perfect tire tracks leading right up to my wall. That was 3 weeks ago. Now it comes every night, just after midnight. Sometimes it idles. Sometimes it circles. The house. Once, it revved loud enough to shake a painting off the living room wall. I've moved twice since then, once to an apartment in Tyler, once to a friend's place near Lake Palestine. Doesn't matter. It finds me, always at midnight, always that same stuttering engine. No one else hears it. No one else sees it. Don't know what Jesse wants. I don't know if it's even him anymore, but I stopped sleeping entirely. I stopped answering calls. I stopped being a person. Now I just wait for the sound. And every night, when it comes, I feel a little less like myself, a little more like I belong behind that wheel. They were the kind of boys who didn't know what to do with silence. Cody, Trey, and Lyle small-town Texas kids who drank too early, laughed too loud, and said things they didn't always mean. They weren't bad kids, just bored, the kind of restless that makes trouble when there's too much empty space and too little future. They were 17, full of bravado and the kind of dumb courage that came from nothing ever going wrong. The kind of courage that thinks ghost stories are for children and that old things rusted out in fields and creeks don't carry weight or memory. That night was supposed to be a dare. Just a stupid late summer dare before school started up again. They'd found the old Chevy 3 days earlier, half hidden in the mesquites that crept toward the Trinity River's edge like fingers. It was sun-bleached and dented, its windows smashed in and windshield fogged over with grime so thick it looked smoked. Trey swore it had been there since his uncle was a kid. Claimed it was the same truck that a drifter named Blake Cormack drove off a cliff in '89 after losing his job at the steel plant and shooting up a liquor store outside Rome. No one ever found a body. Just the truck, lodged between a tree and the edge of the bluff, tilted like it had stopped short of a grave. That was the story, anyway. The boys laughed it off. "It's just junk," Cody had said, tossing a rock off the coffee edge of the bluff, listening for the splash far below. "Let's push it down." They had to fight it. The tires were shredded and flat. The metal groaned like it didn't want to move, like the truck was holding fast to the dry packed dirt. But they shoved together, sweating and panting and cursing, until the wheels caught the slope. It didn't roll so much as it slid, then jerked forward all at once like it had decided for itself. It picked up speed faster than expected, tearing through the brush and disappearing over the edge without so much as a bounce. No explosion, no twisted metal scream. Just silence, broken only by the river below and a strange kind of hum that none of them talked about until later. They left after that. Drove back to Trey's place and cracked open warm beers from the garage fridge. Lyle said his hands felt numb. Cody said he felt like he'd done something wrong, like really wrong. Like in a way he couldn't undo kind of wrong. Trey just laughed and called him a baby. "It's a damn truck, man. Ain't like we shoved a person." That night, it stormed hard. Sheet lightning rolled over the fields and slammed into the sky with such fury it shook Trey's bedroom window. The kind of storm you don't sleep through. The kind that drowns out the sound of things that shouldn't be walking, creeping, dragging themselves up steep muddy riverbanks. They woke up to the sound of an engine idling. It was still early. That watery gray hour just before sunrise when the world is colorless and cold. Cody was the first to look out the window, his breath catching when he saw the shape of it parked in the gravel driveway. Old, boxy, dull white paint stained red with rust. The front bumper was crooked, the windshield cracked. Mud was caked up. To the wheel, wells and leaves were clinging to the undercarriage like something had risen from below the earth. He didn't say a word, just pointed. Trey came to the window next, followed by Lyle, rubbing sleep from his eyes until he saw it too. None of them said it, not right away, but they knew. It was the truck. The same Chevy they pushed off the cliff the night before. Same dent in the hood. Same busted side mirror. Same license plate half hanging, dangling from one bolt. The engine kept running. A low, rattling idle that trembled in their chests, vibrating in the floorboards like something alive and angry. It didn't rev, didn't move, just sat there, waiting. They didn't go outside, didn't speak. Eventually the truck shut off on its own long after the sun was up, and when they finally found the nerve to go check, the cab was empty. Driver's side door locked, keys missing, no footprints. No tire tracks, like it had been dropped from the sky. They called it a prank. Had to be. Someone from school messing with them, maybe saw them at the bluff and beat them back. But they hadn't told anyone. Not even Lyle's cousin, who lived 2 trailers down and always showed up whenever trouble was brewing. No one had seen them push the truck. And how would anyone have gotten it out of the river? The bluff was high, the current strong. They would have needed a crane. The next night, the truck was gone. Just like that. Vanished. But it came back. Always came back. Sometimes it would show up parked across the street, sometimes on the shoulder of the road leading to the bluff. Headlights off, but cab light glowing faint like someone had just shut the door. Other times they'd find it idling. At the edge of town near the old grain silo, engine barely humming, like a heartbeat in a chest full of mud. They tried ignoring it. Tried driving the other way, staying in groups, praying, telling themselves it wasn't real. But it followed them. Cody swore it drove past his house one night slow, deliberate, while his dog howled and scratched at the back door like it was on fire. His parents never heard it. Sighed he was dreaming. But he found muddy tire tracks in the yard the next morning and deep, long scrapes in the oak tree near the gate. Lyle started sleepwalking. His mother found him out on the porch one night, barefoot, eyes wide open, hand on the knob like he was about to climb into something. Trey tried to be tough. Said they should go find it again, chain it down, torch the damn thing this time. But he didn't show up the day they planned to. Didn't answer calls. His mom said he'd been acting strange, woke up soaked one morning with river silt under his fingernails, locked himself in his room. They found him 2 days later out at the edge of the bluff, standing right where the truck had gone over. He didn't jump. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the water like he was waiting for something to come back up. It got worse after that. The truck stopped showing up where people could see it. It started following, showing up in reflections, in puddles, in dreams. Trey said he saw its headlights behind him in the mirror once, just two yellow eyes glowing faint in the dark, floating inches from his neck. Cody swore he heard the horn blare in the middle of a sermon at church, only no one else reacted. Lyle stopped talking. He just stared at the woods now, eyes twitching every time a breeze rustled the trees. Then one night, it came back. For real. Cody was home alone. His parents were visiting his aunt in Austin. He was in the living room, beer in hand, TV on low, when the lights flickered once and cut out completely. Silence fell like a curtain, heavy and absolute. Then the headlights came through the front window, bright, blinding, right up against the glass like the truck was pressed to the porch. He didn't even have time to move. The engine roared angry, wet, like it was pulling something behind it, and the horn blared 3 times. Slow, measured. Then it cut off. When he opened his eyes, the lights were gone, but there were tire marks on the floor, inside the house, across the living room, across the hardwood and into the hallway. The front door had never opened. They found him in the bathtub the next morning, fully clothed, covered in mud, heart still beating, but barely. He never spoke again. Trey disappeared that same week. Lyle a few days later. People say you can still hear the Chevy sometimes, driving slow along the old road near the river. Always late, always just past the edge of hearing. A low idle, a cough, a creak of rusted metal as it pulls around a bend you can't see. Some say the truck's cursed. Others say it's a punishment. But most folks around that part of Texas just stopped going near the bluff, especially after the sheriff's cruiser was found there last year empty. Engine still running, doors locked from the inside. And mud. Always mud. The first time Sheriff Ellis noticed the truck was the day Mrs. Givens died in her kitchen, face down in a pile of half-shelled peas. Her grandson had found her like that, hand still clutching the silver bowl, stove burner still glowing red under. An untouched kettle. When Ellis arrived, he gave the usual condolences, said the usual things, nodded through the grandson's tears and stammering disbelief. But as he stepped out of the house into the dying July heat, he saw it. Parked just past the curve in the road where the sidewalk cracked under a leaning cedar tree, a black pickup. Newer model, glossy paint, no plates. No decals, no stickers. No bumper dings, nothing. Just a flawless black truck sitting there with the engine off, not a person in sight. He didn't think much of it then. People parked in odd places. Maybe someone was visiting the neighbor, or maybe it belonged to a delivery guy. But he watched it for a while, standing on the porch with sweat soaking his collar, waiting for someone to come back to it. No one did. He finished his report, helped the grandson coordinate with the funeral home, and by the time he stepped back out to check the truck again, it was gone. Not pulling away, not turning a corner. Just gone. A week later, Denny Miller was found in his recliner with a TV flickering static in front of his glazed eyes. Natural causes, the coroner said. Denny was 73, diabetic, had smoked. For 40 years, it wasn't a shock. But as Ellis cruised down Sycamore Drive toward the Miller house that morning, there it was again. Same truck, parked beneath a power line where it cut through the edge of the woods. No driver, no lights. Just the same silent, pristine black truck. This time he pulled over, walked up to it slow, hand on his sidearm, looked in the windows. Nothing. On the seats. Nothing on the floor. Empty. Not even dust on the mats. The windows were so clean it was like looking into something brand new, like the interior of a showroom model. But what struck him most was the air. Still. He'd grown up in this part of East Texas. Cicadas always buzzed, dogs barked, leaves rustled, but near that truck, the world got quiet. Like the space around it had dropped into a vacuum. Not even. The wind pushed through the trees. It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He got Deputy Rollins to swing by, see if maybe it was someone local, someone they could identify. But by the time Rollins got there, the truck was gone again. Not a sound. No tire marks. Nothing. Ellis didn't say anything at first. What could he say? That a ghost truck was showing up right before folks keeled over in their homes. The idea sat wrong in his mouth like a rotten tooth he didn't want to probe. He wrote it off as a coincidence. 2 deaths. 2 random sightings. He was tired. Maybe it was the same guy parking in weird spots. Maybe it wasn't even the same truck. But then came number 3. Jenny Thorne, 19, honor student. She was found in her dorm shower, her skin blue, the water still running. They thought it was a seizure, or maybe a congenital heart defect no one had caught. Her roommate said Jenny had been fine the night before, laughing, studying for her bio exam. No drugs, no alcohol, no signs of anything wrong. But around 2 a.m., a campus security officer reported an unusual vehicle parked on the edge of the visitor lot. No tag, no permit, no reason to be there. He'd made a note of it in his log but didn't ticket it. Said it didn't seem threatening. Just odd. Ellis didn't even need to ask what it looked like. When he checked the log, there it was, black pickup, no plates. Parked along the tree line. No one seen entering or exiting. From there, it wasn't every death. Just the unexpected ones, the unfair ones. The ones that made the town flinch. When Sarah Miles drowned in her backyard pool alone, no sign of struggle, no sign she even tried to call for help. The truck was parked at the corner, next to the stop sign where neighborhood kids left their bikes. When the Griffith twins crashed their ATV off that ridge behind their house, the truck was there too, parked along the gravel shoulder like it had been waiting for them to come down. No tracks in the dirt, no footprints. Ellis started looking for it. Whenever he heard sirens, whenever a call came in that made his gut sink, he'd glance at the fringes of the street, behind the fences, near the railroad tracks. Always at a distance, always barely in view, but there it was. Motionless, empty, black. He tried running the make and model Chevy Silverado, maybe 2020 or 2021, but it didn't match any stolen vehicle reports, didn't ping any traffic cams. When he called the DMV with the VIN he thought he saw, scribbled down quick before it vanished, they said it wasn't valid. Too short. Didn't match any known system. He double-checked. Read it again. Same number. It didn't exist. He brought it up once at the diner. Just floated the idea. You ever notice weird cars parked before something bad happens? He asked over black coffee and burnt toast. The table went quiet. Old man Carter muttered something like, "Thought I was the only one." And from there, it spilled out. People had seen it. Never up close, never moving, but parked. Always before someone died. Always alone. We saw it the night Ava got shot. One man whispered, just sitting there, like it was waiting for her to walk into the store. My cousin in the Cogdutches said the same damn thing, said another. Truck showed up on their street the night her baby died in his sleep. Stories, pieces, nothing you could pin down, but all the same shape. Ellis stopped sleeping. Every time his phone rang at night, he looked out his window before answering. And more than once, he saw it, sitting there in the street like it belonged. To the neighborhood, headlights dark, cab empty. He tried to chase it once. It was late. A call came in about a car fire off Highway 84. When he pulled onto the service road, there it was sitting on the shoulder just before the bend. He floored it, sirens on, slammed the cruiser to a halt inches behind it. But by the time he stepped out of the car, flashlight in hand, there was nothing. Not even heat in the air where the engine should have been. The damn thing just vanished. Like fog lifting off the pavement. And then it got worse. He started seeing it before the deaths. Not just an hour or two before, days. Sometimes even a week. He'd pass it on the way to work. Glimpse it parked outside the high school, across from the grocery store, near the hospital entrance, just watching. Like it was taking its time. Each sighting made him tense. Who was next? He started keeping lists, license plate logs from nearby streets, obits, emergency calls. He tried warning a family once when he saw it parked 2 blocks down from their house, staring at their porch like it was picking someone out. They thought he'd lost his mind. Then their son had a seizure while mowing the lawn. Dead before. The ambulance arrived. He tried setting up cameras, staking out neighborhoods. Every time he focused in, it vanished. The truck didn't want to be caught. Only seen. And then, one October evening, he saw it on his own street, just parked 2 houses down, next to the Henderson's oak tree. He stood on his porch for a long time, shotgun in hand, watching it. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't blink much either. By morning, it was gone. But it came back the next night, closer this time, 1 house away. He went through the motions, breakfast, uniform, calls, but his mind buzzed like a fridge left open. Third night. It was in his driveway. He sat in the living room, gun across his lap, staring out the front window. The truck didn't move. It didn't idle. But he could feel it. Like pressure in the skull. Like something unseen was inside it, watching back. He didn't go outside. He didn't call for backup. What would he say? What could anyone do? Just before dawn, he stood up, opened the door. The truck was gone. That afternoon, he went to the doctor. He had this ache in his chest he couldn't shake. Figured maybe it was stress. They ran tests. Took scans, stage 4. Liver and bone. No symptoms. No warnings. Nothing to do now but count the days. The black truck was parked across the street when he came home from the appointment. It's been there ever since. Doesn't come every day. Just enough to remind him. Just enough to let him know it's still waiting. Still watching. Still counting down. It was an old Silverado, 2005 maybe, with sun-bleached red paint that looked pink in certain light and along. Scraped down the passenger side from where Mark had tried to squeeze past a mesquite tree out near his uncle's ranch. The bed was dented. The interior smelled faintly of smoke and Old Spice, and the left blinker ticked faster than the right. It wasn't a good truck. But it was his truck, Mark's. And now that she was done with Mark, she wanted to be done with everything that had his name on it. His clothes, his mail, his recliner, his damn hunting trophies. And especially that truck. She posted it on Craigslist. The Monday after the divorce papers were finalized. Clean title, cash only, firm on price. Got 3 messages in the first hour. One from some kid in Abilene who asked if she'd trade for a dirt bike. But it was the third guy who showed up, a quiet man in a Carhartt jacket with pale blue eyes and a low, slow drawl. Said his name was Roper. Asked one question. It run good? She said it did, and he nodded like that was all he needed. Handed her a folded wad of 20s and took the keys without another word. No questions about the stereo, the cracked windshield, or the stained cloth seats. He drove off without even adjusting the mirrors, and that should have been the end of it. But a WSN single quotes to Dot 3 days later. She woke up around 5 in the morning, not because of any noise, but because the dog, her pit lab mix buddy, was whining at the back door. Not barking, just standing there, low to the ground, whining like something was wrong. She flipped on the porch light and looked out through the blinds. The truck was back. Same scrape down the side, same Longhorn decal on the back window. Same busted taillight from the time Mark had backed into the mailbox. It was parked not in the driveway, but down the slope behind the house, halfway into the weeds, near the line where her property backed up against the dry creek bed. The engine was off. No headlights. No movement. Dot. She stood there a long moment, thinking maybe Roper had brought it back for some reason. Maybe he'd found something in the glove box. Maybe it broke down. But if that was the case, why leave it in the yard? Why not knock on the door? She slipped on her boots and jacket and stepped outside, Buddy tight to her leg, growling now but not barking. The early morning was cold and still, the kind of damp chill that settled into your bones. She kept her eyes on the truck as she walked closer, scanning for movement, a shadow, something in the cab. But the windows were fogged on the inside. All of them. She touched the driver's side mirror and found it cold. She pressed her hand to the hood. It was cold, too. Not just cool, like hadn't been run all night cold. She tried the door. Locked. She walked around to the tailgate and saw the old Marlin's feed and tack sticker peeling off the bumper, just like always. Then she crouched, half to make sure nobody was hiding underneath, half because she felt dizzy all of a sudden. There were no tire tracks. Not in the bundle. Grass, not on the gravel, not anywhere. No L drips either, no boot prints. Just the truck, like it had been set there gently by a crane or something else. She went inside, locked every door and window, called the sheriff's office, and explained the situation as calmly as she could. Deputy Martinez showed up 40 minutes later in a white Tahoe, all sleepy-eyed and polite, but clearly thinking she was being dramatic. He walked around the truck, jiggled the handles, looked under the body, even shined his light in the cab. No plates? He said, "What do you mean?" She asked. "There's no license plate," he said, "not front or back." She stared at him. "It had plates when I sold it." He gave her a long look like he wasn't quite sure if she was joking or not. "You said a man named Roper bought it?" "Yes, cash." "You got a bill of sale?" She handed it over. He glanced at it and raised a brow. "No last name?" "No. He didn't offer, and I didn't ask." "Well," Martinez said, "if you want, we can tow it." "Have it impounded, please." The tow truck came at noon. The driver, old man Crowley, gave her a long stare before backing the flatbed into place. "This your husband's truck?" he asked. "Ex," she corrected. Crowley shook his head. "Heard he died rough. Hit a deer, flipped it 3 times. They say it took him an hour to find what was left of him." "You sure you want to keep looking at this thing?" "I sold it." "It shouldn't be here." He nodded and got to work. But it took longer than expected. The winch strained like the truck. Weighed too much. One of the chains snapped. Crowley cursed under his breath. Even Martinez, who stuck around to supervise, started to look uneasy. It finally rolled onto the flatbed, but something about the way the tires moved, slow, reluctant, made her stomach twist. They took it away. She watched the red taillights disappear down the dirt road. Thought maybe that was finally it. That night, she left the porch light on. Slept with a kitchen knife under her pillow like an idiot, but the night passed without incident. She woke. At dawn, fed the dog and stepped out onto the porch, just to breathe and listen to the quiet, and saw the truck back in the exact same spot, not just similar. Not just a different truck of the same model. The same one, same busted taillight, same Marlin's feed and tax sticker. Same smear of something blackish brown on the back fender. Same fogged up windows. She ran inside. Called Martinez again. Called the tow company. No one answered. By noon, she drove into town herself. The sheriff's department had no record of Martinez being dispatched to her address the day before. The receptionist gave her a polite but confused smile. "We don't have a Deputy Martinez on the roster, ma'am." He was here." "I swear he. Maybe a reserve deputy? But we'd still have his log." "Crowley," she blurted. "The tow guy. You can check with him." But when she called Marlin's garage, the woman on the other end said Crowley had died last week. Stroke, right there in the office. Hadn't been on the road in over a month. She went home, pulled into the driveway, and froze. There were tire tracks this time. But not from the road. They started in the gravel behind her fence line, wound through the weeds, and stopped behind the truck, as if something had driven up to it. Or from it. Buddy wouldn't come outside anymore. Wouldn't eat either. Just lay under the kitchen table and whined. She started hearing noises at night. Low, grinding noises. Wet sounds. Once around 2 a.m., she saw the passenger door swing open and then slowly shut again. Even though there was no wind. One morning, she found muddy footprints on the back porch. Bare feet. Large, heavy. As if someone had stepped out of the truck and wandered right up to her door. The next night, she boarded the door shut, screwed the windows closed, slept with a hammer on her knit stand. 2 days later, she drove out to a junkyard in Glen Rose, begged the owner to crush the truck. He looked at her like she was crazy but agreed. She followed the flatbed herself, watched them drag the Silverado into the maw of the press, listened to the crunch and snap as steel twisted and glass shattered. She drove home with tears on her cheeks, exhausted, hollow. The yard was empty. When she got back, she slept for the first time in days, but in the morning, she opened the curtains and saw it, parked again, not dented, not crushed. Pristine. Like it had never left, like it had been waiting. And when she crept out with a crowbar in hand, trembling, drawn toward it for reasons she couldn't name, when she stepped close enough to reach for the handle, she saw. It was unlocked. She pulled the door open. Inside was the smell of dirt and blood and something else. Something like river water. And sitting in the driver's seat was a photo. A Polaroid. Of her, sleeping in bed. Taken from the foot of the mattress. The truck never left again, and neither did she. I didn't think much of it the first time I woke up behind the wheel. Just chalked it up to a micro nap, maybe exhaustion. Long hauls out of Abilene in late July tend to do that to you. The heat rising like steam off the blacktop, the same. Dust-colored towns flickering by the window. The monotony of the same country songs on the radio, and the loneliness so thick it sometimes felt like a second skin. I'd been running freight to Lubbock and back for damn near a decade. And I'd seen my fair share of weird stuff on those roads. Dead coyotes standing upright like mannequins in the middle of nowhere. Fog banks that swallowed whole stretches of highway, even a fire once that didn't have a source. But I'd never had a night just vanish on me. Not like this. It started after a run through a town I swear wasn't on any map. I'd taken Route 158 because there was word on the CB that 84 was backed up from an overturned cattle trailer. And I wasn't in the mood to sit in traffic while 50 head of beef screamed in the heat. The detour was unfamiliar, but my GPS kept chirping like everything was fine. Just past midnight, I passed a rusted green sign half covered in vines that said, "Welcome to Brayer's Cross." No population number, no county listed, just the name in flaking paint. I don't remember passing another car, a house, or even a goddamn light pole after that. The weird part was I don't remember leaving the town either. I remember turning off the CB because the static started whispering my name, not over the speaker, but inside my head, like a dream you can't quite wake up from. Then nothing. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was parked behind a truck stop off 114. My rig neatly aligned like I'd been parked there for hours. But I didn't remember pulling in, didn't remember passing through the last 100 miles. I didn't remember getting out to piss, didn't remember unbuckling my seatbelt. I'd lost 6 hours. Gone. Like someone cut and spliced a chunk of film from the reel. Now, I ain't one to jump at ghosts. But losing time like that rattled me. So I checked the dash cam. I installed it myself the year before, one of those double view types with infrared and a cloud sync backup in case of theft. I figured it had caught everything, from me zoning out, to maybe just pulling into the rest stop in autopilot mode. But what I saw, it wasn't that. The footage started out normal. Me in the driver's seat, sipping a Monster and muttering to myself about potholes. The radio was playing some George Strait. But then around 12:41 a.m., just as I rolled past the Brayer's Cross sign again on the footage, something changed. I stopped singing. My hands dropped from the wheel. Just dropped. Not slowly, like I was getting tired, but suddenly, like they'd gone numb. And then, this is the part I still can't explain, I just slumped back in the seat. Like a puppet. With its strings cut. The truck didn't swerve. Didn't slow down. Just kept driving. Perfect lane control. Even signaled on a turn through a four-way intersection in what looked like the center of town. But there was no one around. The town looked dead. No lights in the windows, no movement, no signs of life. It looked like a model of a town. Like something you'd build in a diorama and forget to finish painting. The interior cam showed me sitting motionless in the seat. Head back, eyes open. But not blinking. Then came the part I haven't told anyone. Not even the folks at dispatch. At 1:19 a.m., the outside cam picked up something in the rear view just for a second. A blur at first, then what looked like a tall figure running behind the truck, keeping pace, not a car. A person, on foot. Long limbs, no clothes, no face. Just a pale blur and two flickering shadows where the eyes should have been. The thing didn't chase. It just stayed with the truck. Until we passed a long row of shuttered storefronts where it ducked into an alley and vanished. I paused. The footage, rewound, played it again. Same thing, no driver. Me, unconscious. The rig, navigating as if someone else had their hands on the wheel. The streets of Brayer's Cross dark and empty. And that figure, I tried reporting it. Thought maybe it was some kind of sleep driving incident. Maybe a stroke. But the nurse at the clinic found nothing wrong with me. Blood work clean, brain scan clear. Said I was healthier than most men my age. I didn't tell her about the thing on the dash cam. Didn't mention Brayer's Cross either. She wouldn't have believed me. Next night, I tried to find the footage again. Logged into the cloud, gone, not corrupted, Deleted. My device said the files had been manually erased at 4:17 a.m. I was asleep then. I always am now. I used to have trouble falling asleep in the rig, but since that night, it's like the truck wants me out. The moment I get behind the wheel and start the engine, this haze comes over me. Not groggy, just disconnected. Like I'm sliding out of myself. And I always wake up somewhere new. Last week, I woke up just outside a field full of broken down carnival rides. No idea how I got there. No town nearby. Just a long strip of gravel and what looked like a carousel covered in vines. My odometer said I'd only gone 23 miles. But I was 200 from where I started. I've spoken to other truckers since. Quietly, carefully. Asked if they'd ever seen Breyers Cross. Most shake their heads. A few look uncomfortable. One guy, a silent, long-faced driver from El Paso named Rudy, told me he'd seen it once. Didn't stop. Didn't drive. Through. Just turned around the minute he saw the sign and went another way. He said the place ain't real. That it moves, shifts, picks you. He said if you drive through it once, it remembers you. The last time I watched my dashcam, there was no me in the seat at all. Nothing. Just empty fabric. A gently swaying steering wheel and a full tank of diesel. Going to God knows where. The cameras don't pick up faces anymore. Not even mine. My reflection doesn't show in the side mirrors. The backup beeper clicks at things that aren't there. Sometimes, when I'm parked at a truck stop in the middle of the night, I see another rig pull in beside me. Same model. Same make. Same paint job. I get out to say hello, and it's gone. There's a part of me that wonders if I ever really woke up that morning. If I didn't just die back there in Breyers Cross and now something else is behind the wheel, wearing me like a uniform. Something that doesn't need sleep. Something that knows how to drive better than I ever could. Something that doesn't blink. I don't check the footage anymore. I keep the camera off, unplugged. But sometimes when I close my eyes at night and try to remember how I got to wherever I am, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Louisiana, doesn't matter. I hear it humming. Not the engine, not the thing behind it. And I know I'm not driving. Not anymore. I'm just along for the ride. Every night since the first cold front rolled in, the street had gone quiet by 10. That little cul-de-sac in Weatherford, Texas, just 6 houses wrapped around the curve, never saw much action even in the daytime. It was one of those developments, built in the late 80s that had aged into obscurity. Half the porches had paint peeling, 1 or 2 lawn chairs sat permanently sun-faded, and the mailboxes leaned like crooked teeth. But at night, especially after summer gave up its fight, the place hushed in a way that made even the hum of a fridge seem loud. No kids, no dogs barking. Just still air and the rustling of dry leaves blown from brittle oak trees. That's why. The truck stood out. It started the first Monday of October. 2:34 in the morning, sharp. Doug Parson was the one who noticed it first. He had insomnia, always had. Some nights he watched reruns of Dragnet on mute with closed captions. Some nights he stared out the window with a glass of something strong. That night, he was sipping Wild Turkey when the sound cut through the quiet like a razor, dragged slow across Skinna, diesel engine coughing to life at the far end of the street. He thought it was a neighbor's work truck at first. The guy in 1123 maybe. That big bearded guy with a Let's Go Brandon flag on his porch who worked oil rigs down near Odessa. But when Doug leaned over and peered through the blinds, he didn't see the F250 he expected. It was older, boxy, maybe late 70s or early 80s, long bed, two-tone white and rust, one headlight a little dimmer than the other, chrome bumper, crooked like it had been rear-ended and never quite fixed. It idled there, humming loud and constant, parked dead center under the streetlight where the circle turned around. But the cab? Empty. Doug stared for a while. Maybe 20 minutes. Nothing moved inside. No silhouette behind the wheel. No brake lights flickering. No door opening. He even opened the window to listen, see if someone was climbing out, maybe taking a smoke break, but nothing. Just that hollow, rhythmic thrum of the engine, like something breathing slow and steady in the dark. Then the engine cut. Just like that. No door slammed, no tires squealed. It just stopped, lights off, silence returned. Doug watched for a few more minutes, then finally went to bed, blaming the bourbon. But the next night, it came back. Same time, 2:34 a.m., same exact spot. Same rumbling diesel growl echoing through the still street like a low growl from something too big to see. And again, no one inside, no one around it. Just sitting there, humming under the pale halo of the street lamp. Doug told his neighbor, Mrs. Harvin, about it on Wednesday. She brushed it off. Said it was probably one of those DoorDash drivers resting or some kid playing a prank. But Doug saw something in her eyes, a flicker. A moment's hesitation before she laughed. Like maybe she'd seen it too. By the weekend. Everyone had. The younger couple in 1121, Josh and Amanda, set up a camera facing the cul-de-sac. Next morning, the footage showed the truck appearing at 2:34. No headlights coming down the street. No tires rolling up. Just their one frame. Not there the one before. It idled for 18 minutes, then blinked out. Gone. No exit. Like it had never existed. Josh uploaded it to Reddit. Said he thought it was a glitch in the camera software. Something about dropped frames or corrupted data. But even he didn't believe it. You could tell by the way he kept checking the footage. Frame by frame, eyes wide and twitchy. That night, the truck came again. Doug stood in his driveway this time, wrapped in a bathrobe, holding a flashlight like it would help. He didn't shine it on the truck. Something about that felt wrong. Like if you gave it attention, real attention, it would notice you back. He just watched from the edge of his lawn, bare feet on the cold grass, heart pounding louder than the engine. Across the circle, Amanda was standing at her window. So was Old Man Rourke at 1119. The whole damn neighborhood was waking up for the 2:34. Ghost. Except no one called the cops. No one walked up to it. No one dared. Because deep down, they all felt it, that cold undercurrent sliding through the night air. That pressure in the lungs. That sense that if you look too long, if you listen too hard, something might crawl out of the cab that wasn't human. By the second week, dogs started disappearing. A little terrier from the end house. Then a mutt named Bio that belonged to a family 2 streets over. Gone from fenced yards. No sounds, no barks. No struggle. Just empty collars left by gates, some with the tags still clinking against each other in the breeze. Then came the boy. He was 11, lived over on Tanglewood. His mom let him ride his bike to school because it was just 2 blocks, and they lived in the kind of neighborhood where that still felt safe. Until he vanished between home and the school gates. Bike found lying sideways in a ditch, one handlebar bent, the back tire still spinning when they found it. No one saw a truck. No one saw anything, except Doug. That morning, he found black tire marks on the end of the cul-de-sac, half buried in the damp dirt under the leaves. He didn't tell anyone. Just stared at them and felt something twist in his gut like barbed wire. That night, the truck came back. Only this time, the engine didn't idle. It roared. Lights flared, brighter than ever. The street lamp above it flickered and died, leaving only the glow from the headlights. It was pointed straight at Doug's house, not at the street. Not idling aimlessly. It had a purpose now. The engine revved like something impatient. Doug stepped back from the window, heart hammering. The sound vibrated the walls. And for the thought, and for the first time, the cab wasn't empty. There was a figure, shadowed, slouched behind the wheel, unmoving, no face visible. Just a shape in the dark. The truck didn't move. Just sat, growling like a dog with bared teeth. When it disappeared that night, it didn't blink out. It reversed, slowly, backed around the circle like it was memorizing the path, then rolled out onto the street and vanished behind the tree line. Tires left no tracks. No one saw it go but Doug, and by then, he was too shaken to tell anyone. 2 nights later, the lights in Josh and Amanda's house went out around 2 o'clock. No power outage. In the neighborhood, just their house. A neighbor said they heard something metal dragging against pavement. Next morning, their front door was wide open. Their bed was empty, no signs of struggle. Just 2 sets of footprints leading out onto the road. And the unmistakable stench of diesel in the air. Doug tried to leave town after that. Packed a bag, filled up his old Buick, told himself he was visiting his sister in Abilene. But when he pulled out of the driveway, his GPS rerouted. Every time, no matter the setting. It sent him in a loop. He ended up back at the cul-de-sac. Less than 20 minutes later, hands shaking, sweat pouring down his back. His engine died without warning right in front of the circle, and the truck was there, waiting. Lights on. Engine idling. Only this time, the passenger door was open. Doug never left again. None of them did. Now every house on the cul-de-sac sits dark, lawns overgrown, mail piling up, no lights. No laughter, no kids. No life, but the truck still comes. 2:34 a.m. Every single night, it waits. Cab open. Engine humming low, patient and steady. Like it knows more are coming. Like it remembers the ones who gave it their attention. Like it's waiting for you next. The call came through just past midnight. That strange time of night when things don't quite feel real and the air seems too still. Sheriff Ray Harlan was nursing the end of a black coffee at his desk, listening to the low static of the radio. Scanner, when dispatch crackled in and told him there was a pickup doing 80 down. County Road 317, the one that cuts between the pecan groves and dead farmland east of Austin, Texas. The call wasn't from a cop or a civilian. It came from the old traffic monitor camera near the Dalton grain mill, a feed that usually saw nothing but tumbleweeds and the occasional drunk on a four-wheeler. 80 miles an hour on that road was suicide, especially at night. Especially. In that fog. Ray had seen the fog out his window before the call, not the usual low morning mist that clung to the fields. This was the kind that rolled in fast and swallowed things whole. It was thicker than soup, hanging heavy and full of secrets. He thought twice about getting in his cruiser, but he was the only lawman working that night, and there was something about that call that made his gut itch. He finished his coffee, grabbed his jacket, and headed out. The road out to 317 was quiet, lined with cottonwoods and rusted-out barbed wire fences. The fields were empty this time of year, just rows of dry soil and half-dead stalks slouched under the weight of old seasons. Ray drove with one hand on the wheel and the other hovering. Over his radio, eyes peeled for headlights or tire marks or anything out of the ordinary. The fog curled around the front of his cruiser like fingers dragging across the hood. He saw the brake lights before he saw the truck. It was pulled halfway onto the shoulder. A beat-up silver Ford F250 with caked mud on the wheel wells and a license plate barely hanging on by one screw. The brake lights glowed dim red in the mist. No movement. No flicker of cabin lights. But the engine was still running, a deep, steady growl that made the ground under Ray's boots tremble slightly when he stepped out. He approached slow, hand resting on his sidearm, just like he'd done 100 times before. But this didn't. Feel like any traffic stop he'd done before. The air was too still. The crickets had gone quiet. Even the frogs down by the drainage ditch had stopped singing. The fog just stood there, like it was waiting to see what happened next. He shone his flashlight into the cabin through the driver's window. No one was in the seat. No hands on the wheel. No keys in the ignition, but the damn thing was running. All the same. Just idling like someone was about to put it in gear and peel off. The driver's door was locked, but the passenger door wasn't. Ray circled around, opened it, and froze. There was something in the passenger seat. Not a person, not really, just a shape. The way clothes might slump if they were filled with nothing. A faded denim jacket, sleeves pushed up. A ball cap crushed and tilted sideways like it had been worn too long and too hard. There were muddy footprints on the rubber mat below, big ones, leading up to the seat and stopping. But the seat itself was dry, untouched, as if whatever had been sitting there hadn't really had weight. Ray reached in and lifted the hat. It was damp, heavy, like it had been pulled out of a river. Inside the brim, scrawled and smeared black, Sharpie, was the name Cole Hemsworth. That name made something in Ray's brain click sideways. Cole Hemsworth had died 3 years ago. Ray remembered the funeral. Open casket. A nasty wreck off M14, flipped his rig in a ditch during a storm. Pinned in and burned alive before anyone could get there. They said he was speeding, said he'd been drinking. Folks whispered it was suicide. His widow, Beth, moved up to Wichita Falls after that. The truck, this truck, had been totaled. Sold off for scrap. Ray stepped back and looked again. Same. Bumper sticker, same dent in the tailgate. Same faded white Lone Star Farm Supply decal on the back window. That was Cole's truck. He radioed it in, voice low, half hoping dispatch would laugh and tell him he was seeing things. But the radio hissed back only static. When he tried again, there was a faint reply, garbled, broken, like someone talking. Underwater, then silence. He looked back at the cab. The passenger seat was empty now. The jacket was still there. The hat too. But the shape was gone. No footprints. Just the deep, wet smell of river mud and something older, metallic. Like blood left out in the sun too long. Then the truck shifted. Just a jolt. A bounce. Like someone had sat down in the driver's seat. Ray drew his weapon. He shouted, "Step out of the vehicle! Hands where I can see?" No response. He moved forward slowly, flashlight cutting through the mist, now thick as smoke. He opened the driver's door with one hand and aimed his flashlight inside. Empty. No one behind the wheel. Nothing in the back seat. Nothing in the footwell, but the keys were back in the ignition. And the radio was on. It crackled, then played a single phrase. A voice Ray hadn't heard in 3 years. Slow, familiar. "Sheriff, you left me out there." Ray staggered back, breath caught in his throat. That voice, it was Cole. No doubt. In his mind, he remembered Cole's voice from those poker nights at the firehouse, from town meetings and high school ball games. He'd heard it laugh, argue, curse, cry. And now it was whispering through a dead man's truck. The engine revved. The door slammed, shut on its own. Then the truck peeled out. No driver, no hands, just screaming tires and swirling fog as it vanished down the road and disappeared. Into the dark. Ray stood there for a long time, gun in hand, heart thundering. When he finally got back in his cruiser and tried the radio again, dispatch came through clear as day. "You say something earlier, Sheriff?" "We didn't catch it." "Ray?" "Told them he'd followed up on a noise complaint. Told them the road was clear. Told them everything but the truth. And maybe that was a mistake, because the next night, the pickup came back. Not to the road. To Ray's own driveway. He heard it just after midnight, the engine idling out front. He looked through the blinds and saw those same damn brake lights. Glowing in the dark, the same crumpled hat in the passenger seat. Steam rising off the hood like it had been pulled from a river. He didn't go out, but in the morning, he found muddy footprints on his porch. Big ones. Leading up to the door, and the hat was hanging on the knob. He burned it. Threw it in a barrel out behind the shed and watched it blacken and curl in the flames. But the next night, it was back on the passenger seat. Now the truck shows up every few days, always just past midnight, always idling. Sometimes it parks in front of the courthouse. Sometimes behind a diner where Cole used to drink. Once, it circled the cemetery twice before vanishing, always driverless. Always watching. Ray started drinking again, sleeping with the lights on. He sees things now, muddy footprints on hardwood floors, streaks of river silt across his windshield, handprints on his bathroom mirror. Sometimes, when he closes his eyes, he hears Cole whispering from the passenger seat, "Come take a ride, Sheriff. Let's go back out there. Let's finish it." Ray doesn't know what Cole wants. Doesn't know why the truck's still moving, still waiting. But he knows this much. Something came back. Something that shouldn't be here. Something angry, and it's not done driving yet. The call came through just past midnight, that strange time of night when things don't quite feel real and the air seems too still. Sheriff Ray Harlan was nursing the end of a black coffee at his desk, listening to the low static of the radio. Scanner, when dispatch crackled in and told him there was a pickup doing 80 down. County Road 317, the one that cuts between the pecan groves and dead farmland east of Austin, Texas. The call wasn't from a cop or a civilian. It came from the old traffic monitor camera near the Dalton grain mill, a feed that usually saw nothing but tumbleweeds and the occasional drunk on a four-wheeler. 80 miles an hour on that road was suicide, especially at night. Especially. In that fog. Ray had seen the fog out his window before the call, not the usual low morning mist that clung to the fields. This was the kind that rolled in fast and swallowed things whole. It was thicker than soup, hanging heavy and full of secrets. He thought twice about getting in his cruiser, but he was the only lawman working that night, and there was something about that call that made his gut itch. He finished his coffee, grabbed his jacket, and headed out. The road out to 317 was quiet, lined with cottonwoods and rusted-out barbed wire fences. The fields were empty this time of year, just rows of dry soil and half-dead stalks slouched under the weight of old seasons. Ray drove with one hand on the wheel and the other hovering. Over his radio, eyes peeled for headlights or tire marks or anything out of the ordinary. The fog curled around the front of his cruiser like fingers dragging across the hood. He saw the brake lights before he saw the truck. It was pulled halfway onto the shoulder. A beat-up silver Ford F250 with caked mud on the wheel wells and a license plate barely hanging on by one screw. The brake lights glowed dim red in the mist. No movement. No flicker of cabin lights. But the engine was still running, a deep, steady growl that made the ground under Ray's boots tremble slightly when he stepped out. He approached slow, hand resting on his sidearm, just like he'd done 100 times before. But this didn't feel like any traffic stop he'd done before. The air was too still. The crickets had gone quiet. Even the frogs down by the drainage ditch had stopped singing. The fog just stood there, like it was waiting to see what happened next. He shone his flashlight into the cabin through the driver's window. No one was in the seat. No hands on the wheel. No keys in the ignition, but the damn thing was running. All the same. Just idling like someone was about to put it in gear and peel off. The driver's door was locked, but the passenger door wasn't. Ray circled around, opened it, and froze. There was something in the passenger seat. Not a person. Not really, just a shape. The way clothes might slump if they were filled with nothing. A faded denim jacket, sleeves pushed up. a ball cap crushed and tilted sideways like it had been worn too long and too hard. There were muddy footprints on the rubber mat below, big ones, leading up to the seat and stopping. But the seat itself was dry, untouched, as if whatever had been sitting there hadn't really had weight. Ray reached in and lifted the hat. It was damp, heavy, like it had been pulled out of a river. Inside the brim, scrawled in smeared black, Sharpie, was the name Cole Hemsworth. That name made something in Ray's brain click sideways. Cole Hemsworth had died 3 years ago. Ray remembered the funeral. Open casket. A nasty wreck off FM-14 flipped his rig in a ditch during a storm. Pinned in and burned alive before anyone could get there. They said he was speeding. Said he'd been drinking. Folks whispered it was suicide. His widow, Beth, moved up to Wichita Falls after that. The truck, this truck, had been totaled. Sold off for scrap. Ray stepped back and looked again. Same. Bumper sticker. Same dent in the tailgate. Same faded white Lone Star Farm Supply decal on the back window. That was Cole's truck. He radioed it in, voice low, half hoping dispatch would laugh and tell him he was seeing things. But the radio hissed back only static. When he tried again, there was a faint reply, garbled, broken, like someone talking. Underwater. Then silence. He looked back at the cab. The passenger seat was empty now. The jacket was still there. The hat too. But the shape was gone. No footprints. Just the deep, wet smell of river mud and something older, metallic, like blood left out in the sun too long. Then the truck shifted. Just a jolt. A bounce, like someone had sat down in the driver's seat. Ray drew his weapon. He shouted, "Step out of the vehicle. Hands where I can see him." No response. He moved forward slowly, flashlight cutting through the mist, now thick as smoke. He opened the driver's door with one hand and aimed his flashlight inside. Empty. No one behind the wheel. Nothing in the back seat. Nothing in the footwell, but the keys were back in the ignition. And the radio was on. It crackled, then played a single phrase. A voice Ray hadn't heard in 3 years. Slow. Familiar. "Sheriff, you left me out there." Ray staggered back, breath caught in his throat. That voice, it was Cole. No doubt. In his mind. He remembered Cole's voice from those poker nights at the firehouse, from town meetings and high school ball games. He'd heard it laugh, argue, curse, cry. And now it was whispering through a dead man's truck. The engine revved. The door slammed. Shut on its own. Then the truck peeled out. No driver. No hands. Just screaming tires and swirling fog as it vanished down the road and disappeared. Into the dark. Ray stood there for a long time, gun in hand, heart thundering. When he finally got back in his cruiser and tried the radio again, dispatch came through clear as day. "You say something earlier, Sheriff?" "We didn't catch it." Ray told them he'd followed up on a noise complaint. Told them the road was clear. Told them everything but the truth. And maybe that was a mistake, because the next night the pickup came back. Not to the road. To Ray's own driveway. He heard it just after midnight, the engine idling out front. He looked through the blinds and saw those same damn brake lights. Glowing in the dark, the same crumpled hat in the passenger seat, steam rising off the hood like it had been pulled from a river. He didn't go out, but in the morning, he found muddy footprints on his porch. Big ones. Leading up to the door, and the hat was hanging on the knob. He burned it. Threw it in a barrel out behind the shed and watched it blacken and curl in the flames. But the next night, it was back on the passenger seat. Now the truck shows up every few days, always just past midnight, always idling. Sometimes it parks in front of the courthouse. Sometimes behind the diner where Cole used to drink. Once, it circled the cemetery twice before vanishing, always driverless. Always watching. Ray started drinking again. Sleeping with the lights on. He sees things now, muddy footprints on hardwood floors, streaks of river silt across his windshield, handprints on his bathroom mirror. Sometimes, when he closes his eyes, he hears Cole whispering from the passenger seat, "Come take a ride, Sheriff. Let's go back out there. Let's finish it." Ray doesn't know what Cole wants. Doesn't know why the truck's still moving, still waiting. But he knows this much. Something came back. Something that shouldn't be here. Something angry, and it's not done driving yet. It sat at the far end of the DeKalb farm, behind the pecan grove, sunk low into the earth like something half swallowed. The stone ring around it was cracked, moss-covered, nearly lost in the tall grass. Most folks in Eden Creek forgot it even existed. The land had changed hands so many times nobody remembered who dug it or why it had been capped and sealed with rusted iron bolts all those years ago. Some said it had gone dry. Others said it had taken something. Old man DeKalb never talked about it. He died in July, alone in the farmhouse where the wind had peeled the paint off the shutters and the porch sagged like a broken spine. No funeral, no obituary. Just a cousin from Austin who came down, signed some paperwork, and left a week later. By then, the grass was waist high and the well was barely a rumor again. Until the dogs went missing. First, it was the Calder boys' black lab. Then Mrs. Delaney's mutt. Then 2 more from the next county over, all gone within a week. No trace, no blood, no sound. They just vanished. Fences weren't broken. Gates weren't open. It was like they'd walked out on their own. People shrugged it off until the night of the fair. That was the first time anyone heard the voice. It came just past midnight, drifting across the fairgrounds like a song caught on the wind. Low and syrup thick, not quite a whisper, not quite a hum. Nobody could say what it was saying, only that it made the hair on their neck stand up. Some thought it came from the woods. Others said it came from the open field behind the rides, where the grass grew strange and stiff and where nobody ever parked. Sheriff Trammell got called the next morning. He walked the grounds, listened to a dozen versions of the same tale. Folks were rattled. Kids were crying. One teen swore his phone played the voice back to him even though he hadn't recorded anything. That night, the fog rolled in, thick as milk, covered the whole town. By morning, the well had been uncovered. No one knew who did it. The bolts were snapped clean. The stone cap dragged 10 feet off like it had been yanked by something with fingers and teeth, and the grass around the ring was pressed flat as if someone had been lying there, listening. Sheriff Trammell put up tape, called the county, ordered it resealed. But the next night, it was open again. That's when the dream started. People across Eden Creek began waking in cold sweats, shaking, unable to speak. Farmers, teachers, a preacher. They all said the same thing something was whispering to them in their sleep. Not words, not in English. But they knew what it wanted. It wanted them to look. One man, Ronnie Voss, retired mechanic, took a flashlight and walked out there after midnight. His wife heard the front door open. He never came back. They found the light still on, sitting on the grass beside the open. Ring. No blood, no prints. Just a ring of paw prints surrounding the well, hundreds of them. All dogs. After that, the town changed. Churches filled. Bars emptied. People didn't talk after dark. And every night at 1:13 a.m., that voice would drift. Through the fog again. You couldn't tell where it came from. It sounded like it came from under you. Inside you. Soft. Patient. Always humming. Always waiting. Sheriff Trammell brought in concrete trucks. Filled the whole thing to the brim with rebar and stone. Buried it deep. And it stayed quiet. For a time. But 3 nights ago, the fog returned. And someone knocked on the pastor's door just before dawn. When he opened it, There was no one there. Just a small pile of dog collars, wet and muddy, stacked neatly on the porch. And behind them ... paw prints, leading down the church steps, across the gravel, and toward the field, where no grass grows anymore, where the fog sits heavy even in daylight, and where, if you put your ear to the ground and hold your breath just long enough, you might still hear it, calling, not loud, not cruel, just curious, asking if you remember what was buried, and if you're ready to dig it up. The radio crackled to life just past midnight, the same way it always did when the house got too quiet and the memories got too loud. Clay Benton had been retired for almost 6 years now, long enough to grow his hair out a little, long enough to sit in his kitchen without wearing the brown button-up with the Clayton patch stitched over the chest pocket, but not long enough to forget the voice he heard again that night. He had kept the old Midland 40-channel CB mounted in the garage where the smell of grease, dry rot, and motor oil still hung thick in the air. It was one of those things he couldn't bring himself to unplug, like a shrine to the long-haul life and the hundreds of drivers who'd passed through his nights, calling out mile markers, check-ins, and cries for help when tires blew or brakes failed on those endless black stretches of Texas highway. But that night, the third Thursday in July, a sweltering one, Clay heard something he hadn't heard since the wreck on FM 716. Breaker 19, this is Redbird, you copy, Clay? The voice had a drawl, but it wasn't garbled. It was crisp, familiar, too damn familiar. Clay froze. His hand, halfway to a beer, started to tremble. It wasn't just the name. It was the exact voice, the way it clipped off the ends of certain words, the rhythm of it. The voice belonged to Marcus Traynor, a driver Clay had run dispatch for out of El Campo for nearly a decade. But Marcus was dead. Had been since July 20th, 2020. The radio squelched again. Clay, you there, man? God, it's dark out here. Lights are acting up. I don't know what's wrong with the gauges. Everything's dead, but I'm still rolling. You copy? Clay stared at the Midland. Its tiny red indicator light blinked steadily like it always did. No tricks, no special frequencies. He hadn't turned the squelch or changed the band. And that voice was exactly how Marcus had sounded the night of the wreck. Clay didn't answer. Couldn't. His throat had gone dry and his chest felt like it was cinched with a ratchet strap. He just sat there, gripping the armrest of the old chair he'd wheeled out into the garage years ago, listening to the ghost of a man who should have never been able to call in again. Marcus's last known location had been near Sam Hollow Bridge, a rural pass over a dry gulch that barely got rain even in a good spring. He'd radioed in late that night, same as this one, said he saw lights flickering off the shoulder, something like an accident up ahead. Then silence. For 5 years, Clay carried that last call like a rotting weight in his chest. They found the cab 3 days later, mangled and upside down, halfway down the gulch, engine cold, windshield cracked but not shattered. There'd been blood on the seat, yes, but no sign of Marcus. Not a single trace. No body, no tracks, nothing but the torn hat they found wedged under the gas pedal and a crusted-up map folded to FM-716 . And now this ... the radio crackled again, louder this time. I think I missed a turn. None of this looks right. Trees don't even look right. Clay, I think I saw somebody walking up ahead, barefoot. What the hell's he doing barefoot? Clay jerked the mic from the side hook. His fingers trembled. Redbird, is that you? You copy? Static swallowed the garage for a solid 15 seconds. Then came a reply, but it was different now, like the voice was farther away, buried under a layer of wind. Clay, is that you? I can't see nothin'. Feels like I'm sinking. Clay stood up, knocking over his beer. He forgot about the pain in his knees, forgot about the arthritis. All that mattered was the voice. He stepped out into the humid night air, the glow from the garage spilling onto his driveway like the memory of a dream trying to stay alive. He looked out at his empty street, rows of sleeping houses under a sagging summer moon. Somewhere down past the old grain mill, he thought he heard a diesel engine humming, low and steady. He hadn't heard it in years, not like this. He stayed. Up the rest of the night, the radio sitting on the kitchen counter now. At 2:41 a.m., the voice came again. Clay, I passed a sign that said, "Welcome to Meridian" twice now. This road don't loop, does it? Clay felt his stomach drop. Meridian was 120 miles from the last known coordinates they'd logged for Marcus. There was no way to make that kind of time. No road that looped around. Not unless you weren't driving on any road the living knew about. The voice continued, growing weaker. Something's ridden with me now. I hear it breathin'. Ain't seeing no headlights in the mirrors, but it's behind me. Always behind me. Feels like it's sitting up in the sleeper. You ever felt like something was pulling you backwards, Clay? That was the last thing he said before the radio fell into a long, flat hum. Not silence, not white noise, but a low hum like an old engine idling underwater. Clay didn't sleep. He left the radio on. For the next week, it stayed silent. But every time he walked into the garage, he felt like something was off. Like the air was heavier. Like someone had just been there. One morning, he found a single muddy boot print on the concrete floor under the CB. Too big to be his. Too fresh to ignore. That same week, a highway patrol officer up near Navarro County reported seeing a rust-colored Peterbilt drifting slowly along the shoulder just before dawn. No plates, no driver. He said it veered off behind a tree line. But when they went to investigate, they found only crushed branches and an empty patch of dirt with 2 long indentations, like tires had been parked there a while. Then vanished. Clay started recording the radio chatter. He bought a cheap little cassette recorder from a pawn shop in Wharton, something that didn't need a digital hookup, something solid, analog. He captured everything. And the more he recorded, the more he started to hear patterns. Always around. 2:40 a.m., always the same voice, sometimes panicked, sometimes so calm it made your skin crawl. Roads bending in ways it shouldn't, the voice said on the 4th night. Looked in the mirror and saw a second me driven. He don't. Blink, Clay. He just stares. Clay played that tape until the ribbon wore thin. He didn't know why he couldn't stop. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he just needed to understand what had happened to Marcus. But what he came to realize was worse. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. Other voices began to bleed through. Men he didn't know. Women too. Broken, hollow voices calling out from places that didn't exist anymore. FM roads that had been decommissioned. Gas stations that had been shuttered since the 80s. And one voice, a young boy's, whispering, they don't want you to stop the truck. They want you to ride it till you disappear. One night, Clay's power flickered, and when it came back, the CB had changed channels. He didn't touch it. It was locked on channel 23, and the knob was stiff. But it had moved to 13, and the radio buzzed with overlapping chatter, like a dozen voices trying to scream at once through a glass bottle. The final voice came last Tuesday. Clay, this is Redbird? You still with me, man? I ain't got long. I see something up ahead. Looks like a curve. Ain't no curve here, though. Hell, I think it's a mouth. Clay never heard Marcus again after that. The next morning, he walked out to the garage and found the CB melted. Not burned, melted. The wires were intact. No sign of fire. But the casing had warped like wax under a flame. And sitting on the counter was a single item that hadn't been there before. Marcus's torn brown cap, still damp. Still smelling of diesel. Clay never touched it. He bought plywood and boarded up the garage. Doesn't let anyone back there. But sometimes, on muggy nights, the neighbors say they hear voices humming low through the boards, like distant traffic, like CB chatter. And always, without fail, at 2:40 in the morning. It started on the last Friday of April, around dusk, when the evening sky over Montel, Texas, turned that murky red that always looked like it was trying to bleed into night too soon. Maggie Caldwell had just finished feeding the goats and was walking back toward the porch of her old slanting farmhouse, tucked back a quarter-mile off the main road. Her long gravel driveway curved like a question mark through a stretch of sparse cedar and brush, silent most days except for delivery trucks or the occasional lost hunter turning around. She was halfway to the porch when she heard the tires crunching, not just faintly, loud, heavy. She turned and saw it, a brown pickup. Old body style, maybe late 70s, boxy and long, like the kind her daddy used to drive. Dust fumed from its tires as it crept up the driveway. But something was wrong. There were no headlights, though the sun had nearly dipped. No license plate she could make out. And it made no engine noise. Just that crunch of gravel under. Weight deep and rhythmic. Maggie stood there, not moving, one boot planted on the bottom porch step, eyes narrowing as the truck rolled closer. It made it halfway up the drive and then stopped, not abruptly. Not like the brakes were hit. It just slowed, as if uncertain, paused for maybe 3 seconds, and then it was gone. Not turned around, not driven off, not stalled, just not there anymore. Like someone flicked it off the landscape. Maggie blinked hard, squinted through the dust it left behind, and stood rooted to the spot for a full minute before she finally backed up onto the porch and sat down. Her dog, Daisy, an old coonhound with cloudy eyes and slow legs, didn't bark. That struck her hardest. Daisy barked at dandelions, barked at thunder, barked at the neighbor's cattle. But not this time. That night, Maggie poured herself a glass of wine and sat watching out the window. Nothing came. No more gravel shifting. She convinced herself it had been a trick of light, a shadow from a plane overhead, maybe a memory from some old movie bleeding into reality. Whatever it took to make it easier to sleep. Until the next Friday. Same time, same sound, crunch. 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 This time she was ready. She stood by the porch railing with her phone out, recording. The brown truck came up again, same pace, same dusty crawl, same pause halfway through the curve. But the second she blinked, gone again. When she looked at her phone screen, the video was just her breathing into the mic and a long, empty stretch of gravel. Not a single glimpse of the truck. She walked the whole drive that night with a flashlight and found nothing but the faintest impression of fresh tire marks. But even those faded fast like they were ashamed to stay. It had rained lightly the night before, and the drive should have been soft enough to keep those tracks for days. But by morning, they were gone too. By the third Friday, she didn't bother trying to record it. She just sat on the porch and watched. The brown pickup appeared like clockwork. It came up halfway, stopped, and vanished. She noticed this time that the driver's window was down. No silhouette. No hand on the wheel. No face. Just empty, dark space inside the cab. She tried calling the sheriff's office the next day. Got Deputy Jameson on the line, a kid barely out of high school who still called her Miss Caldwell like she was his Sunday school teacher. He humored her, promised to drive out and keep watch the next Friday. He didn't make it 2 minutes. That Friday came, and sure enough, the truck returned. Maggie sat on the porch, Jameson in his cruiser parked at the edge of the property, engine idling, watching. When the truck started rolling in, Jameson stepped out, hand already drifting toward his holster. Then, before it even stopped, his voice came through her cell phone loud and panicked. "Miss Caldwell? I don't know what the hell that is," and the call dropped. The cruiser peeled off like a bat out of hell, tore gravel, kicked dust, and vanished down the county road. She didn't hear from him again. She tried calling his supervisor the next morning, but no one answered. When she finally drove into town on Sunday to ask about it, the station was closed. The building wasn't locked, it was just empty. Dust on the reception counter. No coffee smell. No chatter from the radio room. No cars in the lot. Montel wasn't exactly booming these days. Folks had left in waves after the meatpacking plant shut down 5 years ago, and by now the town felt more like a waiting room than a community. Still, to find a whole sheriff station empty was wrong. She told herself they'd all gone out on some call, maybe a search party for a missing kid. Something explainable, but she felt the lie in her bones. Each Friday it came again. The brown pickup, same halfway stop, same silent disappearance. It started happening earlier. At first, just after sunset. Then right as the sky started to dim. Then before she even got back from the goat pen, she stopped going out entirely. Stopped opening the curtains. Let the mailbox go untouched. Then Tuesday night, it came. She heard it plain as day, that slow, heavy crunch on gravel. Her clock said 8:07 p.m. Too early. Too wrong. She looked out through a slit in the curtains and saw it already halfway up. The drive, headlights flickering this time, like someone was toying with the brights. No vanishing this time. It just sat there, humming. Maggie stood still for what felt like hours. It didn't move, didn't vanish, just sat idling, like it was waiting for permission to come closer. She finally turned away, hands shaking, and lit every lamp in the house. She didn't sleep that night. Wednesday came, and it pulled in again, halfway. Still no driver. Still no engine sound, just gravel noise. Still no plate. But now, the bed of the truck looked different, higher, heavier, like something was in it. She walked down with her deer rifle slung across her chest the next morning, once the truck had gone, to check. There were fresh drag marks in the gravel this time, leading off to the tree line. She followed them for 20 feet and stopped when she saw the torn burlap sack caught on the branch of a mesquite. Dark stains. A lock of hair. She never told anyone. Who would she tell? The town was thinning out. People stopped returning her calls. The power started flickering more often. Her cell service dropped to nothing. The few stores still open in the next town over had started closing early. Short-staffed, the sign said. But she never saw anyone inside anymore. By the 5th week, she was convinced the truck wasn't coming from anywhere. It wasn't approaching from the road, it was just starting there, materializing, like its only job was to appear halfway and never finish. But then, one Friday night in June, it did. It didn't stop halfway. It kept going, slow, steady, like it had made up its mind. She stood on the porch, frozen. Daisy, who hadn't barked once all month, let out the lowest, sickest growl Maggie had ever heard and crawled under the house. Belly dragging the ground. The truck rolled right up to the edge of the porch. Headlights dead, windows still open, cab still empty. Except at WSN single quotes to ... there was movement inside. Not a person. Not quite. The shape in the driver's seat was shifting. Like smoke pressed into the form of something trying to remember what it used to be. No face, no bones. Just memory and hunger. It didn't open the door. Didn't need to. The porch light blew out, and the air went cold, and Maggie felt her skin tighten, stretch, retreat. She tried to run but couldn't make her legs work. The last thing she saw before the dark swallowed the world was the truck's bed. Empty no longer. It was full of her goats. Every single one dead, eyes open. Arranged like a tribute. The next morning, her neighbors, what few were left, swore they saw her pickup leave at dawn. Brown, rusted, no plates. They never saw her again. But every Friday since, that same truck has started showing up in other driveways outside Montel. Always halfway. Always quiet. Always waiting. They got to the house late, not by choice, but because the customer had changed the move time 3 different times already. Billy had been ready to walk the job, but Darren needed the hours, and it wasn't like they were swimming in gigs that week. So they pulled the 20-foot U-Haul up to the curb of that yellowing 2-story ranch house in Eastland, Texas, just before sunset, and started unloading like always. Boxes first, then furniture. Everything felt normal at first, except the house. Something about it made Billy's back itch. It was one of those homes that sat too still, like the air didn't move quite right around it. You didn't hear wind in the trees, didn't hear dogs bark or bugs hum. Even the cicadas kept their damn mouths shut on that street. The customer, a pale woman in her 50s with her hair tied in a tight bun and eyes that didn't blink often enough, just nodded at them when they arrived. No handshake, no chit-chat, just back doors open. Put everything in the kitchen and den. She handed them a wrinkled floor plan already marked with X's. She didn't smile, didn't even introduce herself. Darren whispered something about her probably being a school teacher or ex-military, but Billy didn't laugh. The whole thing rubbed him raw. About 40 minutes into the job, they were halfway done. Darren had just lugged a coffee table into the den, sweat running down his jawline, when he heard Billy yell from the yard. Not loud, just sharp, urgent. Darren stepped back out and squinted toward the truck. The U-Haul was moving. It had been parked perfectly level on the curb, keys out, brakes on, wheels chocked. But there it was, rolling away like someone had slipped it into drive. No engine hum, no sound of gear shift, just silent motion. At first, Darren thought maybe Billy had left it in neutral, but the hill was barely a slope, and this wasn't a slow roll. This was deliberate, confident movement. Billy stood frozen on the sidewalk, arms limp at his sides. He wasn't chasing it, wasn't yelling anymore, just watching like he'd already seen the ending. Darren snapped into action, sprinting down the driveway. But by the time he reached the road, the U-Haul was already 2 houses down, still coasting smooth and silent, still without anyone in the cab. It turned the corner, not a wide, drifting arc, but a sharp, perfect right turn. No brake lights, no waver, just as if someone had gripped the wheel and guided it with calm precision, and then it disappeared. Darren turned back to Billy, who hadn't moved. What the hell was that? Billy finally spoke, voice hoarse. It looked at me. They filed a report. Had to. It was a company truck. The cops didn't laugh, but they didn't take it seriously either. Said maybe some kid boosted it while they weren't paying attention. But both men swore up and down no one got in. No doors opened. No sounds, nothing. The woman didn't say much when they told her. Just blinked slow, like she already knew. Then she handed Billy an old VHS tape. This house has cameras. I've had them for years. In the eaves, the trees, even a couple out back. Take it to whoever needs it. She wouldn't meet their eyes, but don't bring it back. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped with the right date. The U-Haul sat still for nearly 30 minutes as they moved boxes. Then, without warning, the front tires turned. You could actually see them pivot slightly. Then it rolled forward. The door never opened. The mirrors never shook. No weight shifted. Inside the cab, the truck just eased off the curb like it had made a decision all on its own. In one of the camera angles, the one mounted on the gutter above the porch, you could almost swear there was something in the driver's seat. Not a person, not exactly. Just a shape, a vague outline. A blot of shadow where there shouldn't have been any. Darren quit the moving company 2 days later. Said it wasn't worth it. Too many late nights, too many backaches, and now trucks. Deciding to drive themselves, Billy tried to hang on. They found the U-Haul abandoned in a field 15 miles south of Cisco, doors still locked, cargo area still half full. No damage, no signs of forced entry. Just parked. He kept looking at the footage. Played it for the boss, for a couple friends, even a cousin who worked in surveillance. Everyone said the same thing, spooky as hell, but probably a glitch or camera angle or lighting. But Billy knew better. He'd been there. He'd felt the air change. He'd seen that thing, that impression in the seat. And he remembered the way the front wheels turned, not drifting, but chosen. Like something had gripped them with invisible fingers. The company assigned him a new truck a week later. Clean cab, low miles, no complaints. But Billy never trusted it. Kept checking the rear view, even when parked. Locked the doors every time he stepped out. Then it started again. Small stuff at first, the seat being pushed back when he swore he'd adjusted it. The radio flipping to static no matter what. Station he chose. Once, while parked outside a gas station in Waco, he came back to find the truck a full 3 feet ahead of where he'd left it. Brakes still on. No tire tracks in the gravel. Then, one night on a job near Possum Kingdom Lake, it happened again. He and his new partner Chris were unloading a couch when they heard the unmistakable sound of tires on gravel. They turned just in time to see the truck roll back slowly as if pulled by something behind it. No engine, no lights. Just that awful quiet glide. Chris screamed, dropped his end of the couch and ran. Billy stayed frozen the way he had the first time, but now instead of fear, there was something else. A sick certainty. The truck wasn't just acting strange. It was following orders. He walked toward it, slowly, deliberately, like approaching a wild animal you didn't want to spook. The cab was empty, but the driver's seat was indented, like someone heavy had just stood up and left. The keys were still in his pocket. He hadn't even unlocked the damn thing. Billy didn't say anything to Chris, just got in, drove it back to the shop, and told the boss he was done. He left the keys on the desk and never returned. Took a job at a hardware store in Breckenridge and never got behind a wheel again. But sometimes, late at night, he swears he hears a diesel engine outside his house, just idling, just waiting. And once, last summer, a neighbor mentioned seeing a U-Haul parked across the street from Billy's house at 2 a.m. Said it sat there for 20 minutes, engine humming, lights off. When the neighbor got up the nerve to walk over and check it out, it was gone. No tire tracks, no sound. Billy's not crazy. He knows what he saw, what he felt. That wasn't just a truck. That wasn't a glitch or a prank or a fluke. Something had been inside it, and whatever it was, it hadn't finished moving yet. The last real conversation Ron Massey ever had with another adult happened on a Thursday afternoon behind Long Hollow Elementary, where the grass lot dips into scrub trees and forgotten farming tools rust like bones half buried in the soil. He was standing just outside the bus, sipping a bottle of warm Gatorade, watching the last few stragglers wait to be picked up. The other drivers had already pulled off. The teachers were inside. The sun hung low and heavy, throwing long shadows over the cracked pavement where the pickup area met the field. It wasn't unusual for Ron to stay behind. He was retired Army, strict about routines. He'd been driving that bus for 4 years and didn't mind waiting around until every last kid was gone. It gave him a strange sort of peace, one he didn't talk about much since Ruth passed. Kids had a way of making the world seem lighter, like they weren't carrying the same invisible weights grown folks did. That afternoon, 3 of the kids, Micah Combs, Brielle Tate, and Travis Ibarra, were sitting together under the covered bench, legs swinging, backpacks at their feet. They were all 5th graders, all quiet types, polite, never caused trouble. Ron liked that about them. They didn't get loud. They said, "Thank you," when they got off the bus. That kind of thing stuck with him. At exactly 4:12 p.m., a powder blue pickup pulled around the loop and stopped a few feet past the no parking sign. Ron hadn't seen it drive in. It was just there all of a sudden. He thought that was odd, but not too odd. Folks came from the side lot sometimes. He stepped off the bus platform to get a better look. From what he could tell, the truck was old. Late 80s or early 90s model, maybe a Chevy or a Ford. The kind you only saw in small towns like theirs. Faded paint, no plates. Tinted windows. The kids didn't hesitate. As soon as the truck came to a full stop, they stood, gathered their bags, and walked toward it like they knew exactly who was behind the wheel. Ron squinted, expecting the window to roll down or the door to open, but nothing did. The kids opened the back door themselves, climbed in, and shut it behind them. The truck didn't idle. It didn't lurch forward. It just slowly rolled away. Like it had been waiting in motion already, like the driver never had to hit the gas. Ron raised a hand, more instinct than anything, and it never waved back. The truck turned past the fence line and disappeared. That night, their parents called the police. By morning, the school was crawling with uniforms and county officials, and Ron was sitting in the principal's office with the deputy asking the same questions over and over. "When did you see the truck? What color was it again? Are you sure it didn't have plates? You didn't see a driver?" He told them every time, no, he didn't see a driver. Not even a shape behind the wheel. Nothing in the rear view. Just tinted glass and that strange blue paint. They brought out surveillance footage from the school's single-mounted camera over the west side door. It caught Ron pacing beside the bus, caught the 3 kids walking toward the loop, and then nothing. No truck ever appeared in the feed. The kids vanished at the edge of the frame. Gone. Like they walked into fog. Ron didn't sleep that night. He sat in his recliner staring at the TV that wasn't on, replaying the image of that truck in his mind. The way the sunlight didn't glint off it right. The way the kids never looked back. By dawn, he'd convinced himself it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe the footage glitched. Maybe he was overtired. Maybe he saw the wrong truck. He didn't drink. He didn't take meds. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The next day, they sent more cops. A pair of detectives from the state came by. The woman asked gentle questions. The man wasn't so nice. He said they'd traced every registered blue pickup in the county. Nothing matched. No tire prints in the loop. Number. Fingerprints on the bench. And worst of all, no one else saw it. Ron gave them the same story again, word for word. The truck was real. The kids got in. The door closed. It drove off. He wasn't making this up. That weekend, they brought out dogs, helicopters. Community volunteers walked the woods. Local Facebook groups exploded with theories. Runaways, child trafficking, a domestic kidnapping. But none of the parents had any idea who would have taken their kids. No one reported strange visitors. No one claimed any relatives drove trucks. Like that. By Monday, Ron couldn't sit still. He drove out past Long Hollow into the back roads that curled between abandoned farms and dried-up creeks. He knew the county like the back of his hand. He figured if the truck was real, it would have had to turn somewhere off FM 917 or take the gravel near Split Rail Ridge. He drove for 6 hours straight, scanning tree lines and fence gaps, stopping to walk under bridges or check old barns. At one point, just as the sun was dipping low again, he came around a bend by a cattail-choked drainage ditch and slammed on the brakes. There, on the other side of the ditch, tucked behind a rusted cattle gate, was a patch of flattened grass and tire tracks that looked fresh. A perfect circle. Not muddy, just done. Like the grass itself had been pressed down by something that didn't weigh anything. And there, half buried in the weeds nearby, was a child's backpack, purple, Brielle's favorite color. Ron stared at it for a long time before getting out. He walked over, trembling. The backpack was pristine, no dirt, no weathering. It looked like it had just been set there. But when he picked it up, it was full of damp leaves. And inside, under the zipper, was a note folded tight and sealed in. Plastic. It read, in shaky, scrawled handwriting that wasn't quite right. We can't see the driver, but he sees us. Ron dropped it. He turned, looked back at the road, and saw the truck. The powder blue paint looked faded like old denim. Left in the sun. It was sitting on the road behind his own vehicle, engine silent, no driver in sight. No tire crunch, no shadow in the cab. Just sitting there. Watching, he backed up slowly. The door on the truck creaked open, but no one stepped out. Nothing moved. Then the engine growled, not loud, not mechanical, but low and unnatural. Like it was breathing. Ron ran. He drove home and called the sheriff. Told them everything. Where to go. What he saw. When they got there an hour later, there was no tire track, no grass circle, and no backpack. After that, Ron didn't talk to many people. They didn't believe him, thought he was losing it. He resigned from the bus route, stayed home mostly, but every once in a while, on late afternoons when the sun slanted just right through his living room blinds, he'd hear the faint hum of an engine, not close. Just out there. Out past the road. And sometimes, on his security camera, he'd catch 3 silhouettes standing near his mailbox. Not moving. Just watching. The footage never saved. And by morning, the air smelled like rust. It was a Tuesday morning when Calvin Hunt saw the truck. He was pulling out of the diner lot just past sunrise. The same diner where he ate his bacon and eggs every weekday since his wife passed. Quiet place on the edge of town, Harts Creek. Texas, population just under 1,800 if you counted dogs and drifters. The kind of town where you noticed when someone changed their haircut, let alone when a truck rolled in from out of nowhere. He was halfway through shifting into reverse when it came crawling up Main Street slow, like it didn't want to be. Seen, yet didn't care if it was. An older model Ford F250 navy blue or maybe black under the dirt and wear, with a deep crease down the side and rust chewing at the bumper. Calvin saw it just long enough to remember something strange about the cab. The windows were fogged from the inside, thick enough that even the morning sun couldn't cut through. No plate on the back. No visible driver. He paused in his seat, hand frozen on the gear shift, watching the thing roll by like it was coasting on ghost steam. It passed the flower shop, then the hardware store, then turned toward the old cattle bridge that hadn't seen a full vehicle since the 80s. Calvin sat there blinking, heart thumping for reasons he couldn't quite name until it struck him he'd seen that truck before. Not in town, not in real life, but in a missing persons bulletin stapled to the corkboard at the post office. The flyer had yellowed from the sun and curled at the edges, but he remembered the photo. It was a still taken from a security cam at a gas station up near Wichita Falls. 2 kids had gone missing, teenagers, boy and girl, maybe 15. The image showed a truck just like this one pulling away from the pumps around midnight. The plate had been unreadable in the footage. The kids were never found. That was last year. Calvin told himself he had a bad memory. Told himself a lot of things. But he couldn't shake the feel of it. The way the tires barely seemed to press into the pavement. The absence of a license plate like a missing tooth. The fogged windows like breath had been pumping inside the cab all night. He drove home. Didn't talk to anyone. Kept looking in his rear view like it might sneak up on him. That evening, he dug around in the junk drawer until he found the folded flyer he'd torn off the post office board months ago just because something about the story had gotten under his skin. He flattened it on the kitchen table, smoothed the creases, and stared at the photo again. It wasn't high res, but now that he had the image of the real truck fresh in his head, he felt certain. Same dent in the panel. Same mirror hanging a little off-center. Same streak of missing paint on the hood. That night, Calvin didn't sleep well. He kept hearing an engine idling out on the street. But every time he pulled back the curtain, there was nothing there. Just empty asphalt glowing under the orange halo of the street lamp. He didn't tell the sheriff. Something told him not to. That maybe the wrong kind of attention would make. The truck stopped rolling altogether. Or, worse, make it come looking. But the next morning, it was back. He saw it while driving past the grain silos on Route 9, parked half off the shoulder, facing the road like it was watching him approach. Again. No driver, no plate. A fine mist coated the inside of the cab. Not just on the windows, but thick like steam rising from something rotten. Calvin slowed down, curiosity overriding fear, and rolled his own window halfway down. He stopped across from it, engine humming. That same sick feeling crawled up his spine like a cold lizard. He stared, waited for movement. Then he saw something press against the inside of the windshield from within. A palm, small, smudged, and then another higher up, smaller still. A child's. He hit the gas, peeled gravel. Didn't look back. For the rest of that week, Calvin saw the truck 5 more times. Always parked. Always empty. Always fogged. Once. It was behind the school, between 2 buses. Another time, it sat by the river where the bridge had collapsed years ago. A third time, it was near the vacant farmstead off Parker Road. The place kids used to dare each other to go until one boy disappeared chasing a flashlight into the woods. Each time, he felt the same pressure in his head like being underwater. He thought about calling someone. But who? The sheriff barely believed in speeding tickets. The town ran on habits, and Calvin knew there were some things you didn't talk about if you wanted folks to keep tipping their hat your way. On Sunday, he couldn't help himself. He brought a disposable camera from the gas station, the kind they still sold in towns too small for real electronics. He found the truck parked near the water tower at the edge of the woods. No movement. No noise. He crept closer, snapping photos. The fog on the windows looked thicker now, like smoke. The cab interior was shadowed, just a flicker of movement now and then, but never sharp enough to see. When he got the film developed on Monday, half the shots came back blank. Others were warped stretched shadows, glitched light streaks, and, in one, the shape of something crouched in the bed of the truck. Not a person, not even animal. Long limbs, no face. A thing out of proportion, like someone's bad dream frozen in frame. The photo guy didn't charge him, just handed the envelope over with a quiet nod and didn't meet his eyes. Tuesday night, someone knocked on his front door at 3:14 a.m. He woke instantly, heart hammering. The knock didn't come again. No lights from the street. No motion. He pulled on his boots and opened the door slow. No one on the porch. But across the street, the truck sat idling in the lot of the closed-down Baptist church. Headlights off. Engine faint and uneven, like a tired heartbeat. Calvin stared. A shape stepped out from behind it. Not toward him, just out into the open. A young man, maybe 16. shirt stained with something dark. His eyes were glassy. He didn't wave, didn't speak. Just stood there. Then the fog in the cab twisted, like something inside was breathing heavy now. The boy turned and climbed in. The truck rolled forward, headlights still dark, and vanished into the mist that hadn't been there a moment before. Calvin never told anyone. But the next week, a new flyer went up at the post office. Another missing. Kid. And the photo on that one? The same goddamn truck. He never looked at the road the same after that. Never left his porch light off either. And sometimes, when the fog gets real low across the fields outside town, he swears he hears the crunch of tires on gravel. Always slow. Always heavy. And always too late to stop. They told me the night shifts at the gravel lot would be boring. Bring a book, Marty had said. Or one of those little radios if you still got one. Nothing ever happens out there except the wind and the raccoons. But Marty didn't mention the truck. He didn't mention the sound of a horn, 3 short honks like a coded knock on a door that shouldn't be opened. The lot sat just off Farm Road 176 outside of Junction, Texas. Flat, dry, surrounded by broken fencing and patchy mesquite brush. A few trailers were parked haphazardly near the back chain link gate, the kind of place where old machinery was left to die in silence. The company paid me $16 an hour to sit in a folding chair behind a prefab trailer and log any inbound or outbound traffic between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I signed up because I needed quiet. I needed time to think. That first week went just as boring as expected. I brought thermoses of coffee, my old army flashlight, a field notebook I never really used, and a padded vest I could zip up to my chin when the wind kicked through the lot. Most nights were bone dry and silent, interrupted only by the scratching of wind-blown grit or the creak of a fence. I swore I'd tightened. Then came Wednesday. It started with that horn. I had just leaned back in the rickety folding chair and let my eyes drift shut, not fully asleep, just resting them. That's all. Then came the sound. Not blaring, but unmistakable. 3 short honks, sharp, crisp, like someone hitting the wheel with purpose, not anger. I bolted up and turned toward the entrance, expecting maybe a trucker pulling in late or someone lost. But there was nothing there. The only thing I saw were the long shadows cast by the yard lights and the dust rising in lazy swirls along the gravel path. I waited, holding my breath, but no engine followed. No headlights. No crunch of tires on stone. Just silence. I told myself it was some ranchers. Truck on the nearby road. Sound carried out here. The stillness made things strange. That was all. But it happened again, exactly at 2:07 a.m., same sound. 3 short honks. I checked my phone's clock both times. It was like the noise waited until I let my guard down. Like it knew. The next night I came prepared, sat up straight, watched the gate with a kind of anxious focus I hadn't felt since Afghanistan. Nothing happened for hours. At 2:06, I gripped the edge of the trailer wall and leaned out slightly. I scanned everything, the field, the road, the fence line. Then like clockwork, 3 honks, loud and close. But I didn't see a damn thing. It sounded like it came from just past the fence. Maybe even from the edge of the shadows near the parked trailers. But I walked out there with my flashlight. Walked all the way down to the rusted old Mack truck they kept for hauling junk trailers. The one that hadn't moved in years. And there it was, same truck, same cracked windshield, same busted front tire. And it looked cold, real cold, not used. I even checked the hood, then opened the cab door just to be sure. The inside smelled like sun-baked vinyl and old oil. There was dust coating everything. Some dead flies stuck to the dash like they'd been there for years. The horn didn't even have a visible wire connection. I slammed the door and turned back to the trailer. That's when I saw the footprints, just one set, leading from the Mac toward the chain link gate. I don't remember walking back. I just know I ended up sitting in the chair with my vest zipped all the way up, staring at the gate, waiting. That Friday, I brought my own trail cam and mounted it on a piece of rebar I wedged into the gravel. A motion-triggered one I used for bow hunting back in Del Rio. I aimed it directly at the Mac. I wanted to see what the hell was going on. At 1:50 a.m. I leaned my head back. Not to sleep, just a second of rest. Then it happened. 3 honks. Loud. So loud I swore I felt them in my chest. I didn't look at the Mac this time. I didn't want to see anything. I sat perfectly still, staring at the dirt under my boots, counting to 60. Then I counted again. And again. When I finally checked the cam footage the next morning, there was nothing. No movement. Not a bird. Not a breeze. But the audio picked up the horn. Loud and clear. I showed it to Marty the next day in the break room. He didn't say much. Just looked at the screen, went quiet, then pushed it back toward me. That truck's been sitting since '96, he said. Old man Alvarez had a stroke in the cab. Nobody touched it since. His kids said the horn honked right before they found him. I laughed. A nervous, dry kind of laugh. Come on, man. I'm serious, Marty said. Guy slumped over, foot on the floor mat, hand still holding the wheel. Horn stuck. They heard it 3 times. Neighbor called it in. I didn't go in that night. I told him I was sick. I stayed home and drank too much whiskey and watched movies with the sound off. I kept hearing it though, even with the windows shut. 3 honks, somewhere outside. I went back Saturday. I don't know why. I guess I thought I'd imagined it all. The mind can twist things. It was quieter than usual. No wind, no dogs barking, no coyotes in the distance. Just me and the dark. At 2:06. I kept my eyes wide open, didn't blink. But the second they started to dry, just as I reached up to rub them, the horn blared again. 3 short honks. I stood. I didn't want to, but I stood and walked toward the Mac. The door was open, not all the way, just slightly ajar. Inside, the dust was gone. The seat looked used. There were fresh scuff marks on the vinyl floor. And something else. A smell. It wasn't oil or rubber this time. It was something sweeter, like old cologne. Or formaldehyde. I backed away. The next night, I left my phone's camera recording through the whole shift. Sat it on the edge of the table and aimed it straight at the gate. 3 honks came again. Didn't check the Mac this time. I went home at dawn, scrubbed the footage, and watched it frame by frame. At 2:07 a.m., the camera shook slightly. Then a shadow passed across the lens. No shape, just the absence of light. But the weirdest part, there was a frame where something stared directly into the lens. Not a face, just ... The impression of one, 2 dark pits, and a dent where a nose might have been. I haven't gone back since. I told the company I quit. Told them they could keep the last paycheck. But sometimes around 2 in the morning, I still hear it. 3 short honks, and always right when I close my eyes. It started like a rumor. One of those late-night murmurs passed between gas station clerks and highway patrolmen trying to stay awake. The kind of thing you hear through a dusty screen door just after midnight when the bugs are louder than the TV and the wind keeps knocking a loose sign somewhere out back. It was always the same stretch of Route 90, somewhere between Uvalde and Sanderson, and always after dark. The stories never made the papers, and the sheriff's office never filed a report, but everyone who worked the graveyard shift out that way had a version of it. People said there was a fleet of black utility trucks, 8, sometimes 10, once even a dozen, driving in single file with no logos, no license plates, and no drivers. The first time I heard it, I was sitting at Manny's pit stop off FM 2690, halfway through a stale honey bun and a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed with radiator fluid. The old man behind the counter, Jimmy, I think his name was talking to a state trooper who looked too young to grow a proper mustache. "Same time last night," Jimmy said. "Midnight sharp. I was out back tacking a leak and saw the first one pass by. Lights on, engine humming low, but not a soul in the cab. Just rolled on by like ghosts on wheels." The trooper didn't laugh. He just sipped his coffee and nodded like he'd heard it before. I was running long hauls back then, mainly pipe fittings and industrial solvents out of El Paso. Independent contractor, kept my own logbooks, drove a 20-year-old Freightliner that had more rust than paint. I didn't care much for ghost stories. Not until the night I saw the trucks myself. It was early September, heat still clinging to the ground like sweat on asphalt. I had just passed the split near Comstock, where Route 90 starts turning more desert than road. That part of Texas feels like the world gave up trying to fill it. No towns for miles, no cell signal, just miles of cracked pavement, buzzards, and the occasional rattlesnake flattened like a popped tire. Remember the time, exactly 12:02 a.m., because my dash clock had just flipped and I was thinking about stopping at the next wide shoulder to relieve my bladder and stretch. That's when I saw the headlights in my side mirror. A line of them. All the same dull yellow-white, evenly spaced like soldiers in formation. I checked the road ahead empty. Nobody behind me for at least 10 miles before that. And suddenly, there they were. The first truck pulled up beside me, matching my speed. It was a utility flatbed, the kind the power company uses. Jet black, no markings. Windows tinted so dark they swallowed the moonlight. But I could tell. There was no one behind the wheel. I slowed a little, more out of instinct than fear. The truck kept pace, humming along as if it knew what I was doing. Then it crept ahead, taking the lead. Another pulled up beside me. Same deal. No plate, no driver. No sound but the smooth rumble of engines that felt too perfect, too synchronized. It was like they were breathing together. One by one, they passed me. I counted 9. Every single one was identical, same make, same matte black paint, same high-tinted cab with nothing inside. They didn't wobble, didn't drift. Just moved in a line like a motorcade from hell. I pulled off to the shoulder near a cattle guard and shut my engine down. The convoy kept going, slipping into the dark like it had never been there. I sat in silence, my hands shaking on the wheel, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe I was tired. Maybe I nodded off and dreamed it. But my logbook said I'd taken my rest break already, and my thermos was still warm. I wasn't dreaming. I told one person, Manny, back at the pit stop. He just nodded, like I joined some club nobody wanted to be part of. They don't show up on traffic cams, he told me. Sheriff tried to pull footage last month. Nothing but a long stretch of empty road. You can hear the engines on. The audio, though. After that, I started keeping my phone on the dash, camera app ready. I passed through Route 90 at different times, to different nights. Sometimes nothing. But other times, always just after midnight, the trucks would show. Up, never the same number. Sometimes 7. Once, I counted 13. I recorded it once, but the footage got corrupted. Just static and darkness. But the sound, the hum of engines, low and hollow, stayed. I got obsessed. Started reading old highway reports, dot logs, anything that mentioned black utility trucks. Found a blog by a woman in Del Rio who swore her husband had chased one off the road and ended up wrapped around a mesquite tree. She said the truck never stopped. The EMTs found no skid marks, no oil trail, no debris. Just him dead and a cold draft hanging in the air like the truck had taken something with it. Another guy posted on a trucker forum. said one of the trucks followed him to a rest stop outside Alpine. He got out to check, walked around the cab, and it was gone. Vanished, like it had never existed. The stories started to change after that, more violent. A rancher near Langtree said he found tire tracks in his pasture too wide for any pickup, too narrow for a semi. The tracks formed a circle, perfect and tight, and all his cattle were dead by morning, no wounds. Just lying there, eyes open. The worst was a couple from San Antonio. They were heading west, visiting the wife's sister. In Marfa, their dash cam caught something the back of a black utility truck swerving into their lane. The video ends there. The cops found their car upside down in a dry arroyo. No other tire prints. Just theirs. I kept driving Route 90 for 3 more months, hoping to catch more proof. I stopped sleeping through the night, stopped calling my daughter, stopped caring if my invoices got paid. I just wanted to understand what I'd seen. Then came my last run. It was mid-November. A cold front had rolled through, and fog hung over the highway like it was poured from a bottle. I hit the stretch near Shafter around 11:50 p.m. Dead silence. Even the crickets were quiet. I turned off the radio. The only sound was my engine. Then they came again. Out of the fog, first one, then another, then 5 more. Black trucks. No plates. No drivers. Just shapes gliding through the mist, lights dull like old lanterns. I didn't slow down this time. I pulled into the middle of their line, let them surround me. It felt deliberate, like they had been waiting. I reached for my phone. Dead. Not low battery, just dead. Cold to the touch. I don't remember the next few miles. I remember fog. And lights. And something whispering under the engine noise, not words exactly, but rhythms. Like breathing that wasn't mine. I woke up in the cab with my Freightliner parked on the side of the road, engine off, keys still in the ignition. It was morning. Clear skies. A DPS cruiser pulled up and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I'd fallen asleep. They let me go. But when I checked my dash cam later, there was 37 minutes of static. Then one clear frame, a black utility truck, parked in front of my rig. Driver's door open, but no one in sight. I don't drive anymore. Sold the Freightliner to some kid in Laredo who wanted to live the road life. I didn't warn him. What would I say? I still dream about the trucks. Still hear that hum late at night, like they're passing just outside my window. Sometimes I wake up and my boots are wet. And sometimes, just sometimes, I find tire tracks. In my gravel driveway, wide and black and clean. Like they were just there. Like they'll be back. The first night it happened, Cal didn't think much of it. Just a pair of old tire tracks curling around the barn like someone came in, circled once, and left. No busted padlock, no broken boards, no tools missing, not even a scuff on the dirt-smeared walls. Just those wide, fresh treads in the loamy soil and the faint hum of something mechanical long gone quiet. A scent hit him first. Diesel, thick and greasy, the kind that sticks to your nostrils and makes your morning coffee taste like engine exhaust. The barn sat at the edge of his property just outside Jacksboro, where FM 2210 cuts through miles of rough pasture land and overgrown mesquite. It was old, built by his grandfather during a time when nails were square and hammers heavy. Cal only used it for spare fencing, oil drums, and the occasional dead tractor battery. Nothing worth stealing. That second night, the wind changed. It blew north off the river, dragging in cooler air and the smell again, stronger this time, like something had been parked for hours. When he stepped out with his flashlight, the beams caught dust still settling around the barn. But there was nothing. No taillights, no rev of an engine, No sound except the whip of weeds against his boots. The tracks were there again. This time, clearer. Pressed hard into the soil, just a few feet from the wooden doors. They were wide and deep, like something heavy had sat there, rumbling in place, not moving an inch. Cal walked a slow circle. Around the barn, boots crunching gravel, skin prickling in the cold. He touched the side of the barn, and it was warm. Like something had been sitting there with its engine running. But the grass wasn't scorched, and there were no fumes, no smoke, no glow from headlights hiding behind the trees. By the third night, Cal stopped trying to sleep. He sat on the porch with a thermos of coffee, his .30 to 30 resting across his lap. He didn't tell Clara, his wife, figuring it was better not to make a fuss over nothing. But around 2 a.m., when the crickets went quiet and the cattle stirred, behind the main shed, he heard it. A low, steady chug of an idling engine, distant, but moving closer. Not fast, not like a truck barreling in, but slow, deliberate. He stood and stepped off the porch, careful not to creak the boards. The sound grew clearer with each step toward the barn. By the time he reached the fence line, he could swear it was just on the other side, behind the barn, maybe 15 feet from where he stood. Then it stopped. He rounded the corner quick, rifle raised, finger brushing the trigger guard. Nothing, no lights, no dust, just silence. The scent of diesel hit him again, thick enough to make him cough. He looked at the ground. New tracks. They circled the barn again, then trailed off down the dirt path toward the tree line. But the trees weren't disturbed. No broken branches, no flattened brush. It was like the truck had just vanished. The fourth night broke something in him. He didn't tell Clara because she'd been trying to get him to see a doctor for months. Something about his memory getting soft around the edges, whatever that meant. But Cal knew what he saw. And that night, he parked his own truck beside the barn, hoping to bait the thing, whatever it was. He left the lights off. Sat there in the dark, windows down, rifle across his knees. At 1:47 a.m., his rearview mirror showed movement, a glow. Soft orange, like running lights through a fog. Then the sound came. That same low growl, deeper now and closer. Cal held his breath. The hairs on his arms stood up. He glanced over his shoulder, but the mirrors fogged instantly. He wiped them. Nothing. Then the hood of his own truck started to vibrate ever so slightly. The sound wasn't coming from his engine. It was coming from the other side of the barn. He stepped out, boots quiet on the gravel. The ground underfoot was warm. The scent made him gag. Stronger than ever. He took 2 steps around the barn's corner and stopped. There was no truck, but the dirt steamed slightly. The air shimmered like heat waves off asphalt in August. And the barn wall, he reached out and touched it, was hot. Burning hot. He yanked his hand back with a hiss. That 5th day, he finally told Clara. She said he was probably sleepwalking again. Brought up the time last year when he'd wandered outside at 3 a.m. muttering about something in the trees. Cal didn't remember that night, not really. Just flashes of something moving between the tree trunks, and the way the cows bawled low like they sensed something. That night, Clara said she'd sit out there with him. He refused. Didn't want her part of it. Didn't want to risk her seeing what he couldn't explain. So he lied and said it didn't show up. Said maybe it was just some ranch hand playing games, or a neighbor's truck backfiring in the distance, but he stayed up. And this time, he stood behind the barn with his spotlight ready, switched off. Finger tight on the trigger. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the sound started again. But this time, it didn't idle. It growled. Deep, low, and angry, like a wounded animal just out of sight. Then the ground shook. Not much, just a tremble, like something massive had dropped onto the dirt. The light in Cal's hand flickered, then went dead. The batteries were fresh. He turned back toward the house to yell, maybe call Clara, but the house wasn't there. It was just blackness, flat and empty, like the whole world beyond the barn had folded into a shadow. Then he felt the heat. It rolled across his skin like breath, heavy, wet, mechanical, and something moved to his left. He didn't see it, but he felt it, like a presence. Like the space beside him was suddenly occupied by something bigger than him, something wrong. He turned, rifle raised, and there it was. A truck. At least, it used to be. It was the shape of a truck, a long cab, a flatbed. But it shimmered, flickering, at the edges like static on an old television. Its grille was wide and jagged, teeth where there should have been chrome. The headlights glowed, but not yellow, red. Dim pulsing, alive. There were no plates, no windows. Just a cab fogged with black smoke and a low hiss from something unseen inside. The engine revved and the barn shuddered. Cal stepped back, heart thudding, bile in his throat. Then he heard a dot from inside the cab. A voice. His voice, repeating the same 3 words, over and over. Shouldn't have buried it. He turned and ran, sprinting blind through what should have been pasture, but the grass felt like sand. The trees were gone. The moon overhead had vanished. By the time he reached the house, or where it should have been, dawn had already started. The world snapped back like a rubber band. Light returned. Birds chirped. And his boots were caked in something that looked like oil but smelled like blood. The 6th night, he stayed inside. He didn't sleep. He just sat at the kitchen table, watching the clock, shotgun across his lap. When the sound came again, Clara didn't stir. The dogs didn't bark. But he heard it, idling, just outside. He didn't go out. But in the morning, the tracks were there again. And this time, they didn't just circle the barn. They went around the house.